Sick. We're back. Episode 20.
Episode 20.
Down here in the Lone Star State, Texas, Austin. Yeah, came down yesterday, flew in. Busy week for me. Was at the track all weekend, and then flew down. I know you were doing some traveling, yeah?
Yeah, a bunch of traveling. You just came back from Europe with the girl, and then
little honeymoon.
Yep, a little honeymoon. Making sure that's all good and trying to just waiting on the government, man. Just waiting on the government. But no, I'm stoked. We're here in Coda. It seems like it's going to be a little bit cooler this year than the 110 plus that we had last year. We've got somebody from Texas. I don't think originally from Texas, but multi-time Superbike champ, MotoGP rider. Elbows is his nickname. And we got Ben Spies with us. And before we get into that, we want to launch we just got another sponsor on board, and this is pretty stoked. We got UASA Batteries. They've stepped up and they've come on board, and they're doing a partnership with us, and I believe with you, Corey, personally. But UASA Batteries is the most trusted battery in power sports since 1979. For over 45 years, UASA has delivered power, reliability, and passion at every turn. We're stoked to have them on board as our second partner. And, of course, as always, Law Tigers, America's motorcycle lawyers. If you know anybody that's been in an injury or in an accident, please call 1-800-LAW-TIGERS. They've backed our pod since the beginning. And, yeah, let's get this party started.
Crushed it. I'm still trying to get this thing to fucking stay with me here. Just keep spinning on me.
What do you want to do?
We're good.
You think? You just going to keep leaning into it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Well, welcome, Ben. Stoked to have you on. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, and been on a few other podcasts, but nobody in road racing, I don't think. Have you done anybody?
No, not yet.
No? Well, thanks for coming on. When'd you get in?
Last night.
Last night. You're pretty close, right? You said you're about 2 hours from here?
3.5.
3.5.
So that's close in Texas.
Yeah. I was saying to Kay last night, I'm like, hey, she's like, because we did a layover in Atlanta. She's like, you just want to do a layover, so we go to another Sky Club on the way here. I'm like, no, it's a far flight. Like, there's not really that many direct options. She's like, it's not that far. I'm like, we're literally closer to California than we are to New York. She's like, no way. So I had to pull up the whole map and break it down. I'm like, Texas is like the size of like the entire tri-state area.
Oh, I mean, it's 12 hours across, each way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's big.
I've driven through it one time, and I was in my little rowdy Audi, and man, that was a big day. And there's a part in Texas where you go and you don't see anything for a long time.
When you get an hour west of Dallas till you get to El Paso, there is nothing.
It's crazy.
It's horrible. So.
What you've been building a new house? That's been kind of your big project lately. Project manager.
Yeah, exactly. Yelling at people and just trying to keep my horses in the fence. But we've been building a house for about a year. Got another month left, so now it's to the point where it's just punch list and finding the little stuff and just getting ready to move in. So stress is high for the wife a little bit more than me. I kind of put that project on her. I said, hey, sweetie, I'll let you build your own house, so you can do everything. So it's been fun. But, we're about to move out on some land, and girls will be able to have fun and hang out.
You got some horses and stuff too, right?
Yep. Yeah, I don't ride them. We've got 4 horses, 3 donkeys, and we just we let them do their thing. During the winter, we'll put jackets on them and stuff like that, but they roam the land. I don't ride anything like that has a brain anyway, so I'm not doing it. But I feed them and take care of them and just watch them.
Is that is that a passion, or is that just like tax reasons?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, like I said, we rescue them, so it goes down that route. And then yes, my land is kind of ag taxes, but it's based off of deer and wildlife. So I've got to have corn feeders and food plots and stuff like that, which is still much cheaper than paying the normal taxes and not doing it. So a little bit of both, but I enjoy being around the horses. I just, like I said, I'm not going to ride one. So.
I know, that's pretty scary. I get pretty scared around horses. Yeah. I don't know why. For me, people are so comfortable, and when I get around horses, I just get that nervous feeling of I just don't want to get kicked, man.
I got kicked last week.
What?
The sweetest one, actually, she kicked me. I was walking behind her, and we have a lot of flies right now, so it was just the perfect timing where there was a fly on her back leg, and she went to shake it, and she kicked me right in my IT band. I was on the ground for 15 minutes just screaming.
Can't imagine. No. I mean, that's the scariest thing is they just have a mind of their own, and they're huge.
Yeah, they're huge, yeah. But they're good animals, though, most of the time.
When did you move? You weren't originally from Texas, but everyone kind of knows you as being Texan, probably because of the helmet and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I claim Texas, but I was born in Germantown, Tennessee, so Memphis, basically. And I always say I hung out there for 6 months, and then I was in Texas my whole life. So yeah, born in Tennessee, but definitely raised in Texas and all that kind of stuff. So that's the home.
What was it like when your wife, because your wife's Italian, you met her in Europe, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. What was her first kind of impressions of coming to Texas?
Hot. And just like, oh, the air conditioners, it's too much. And, you walk into a gas station when the doors open and they have that super AC that hits you. And she couldn't believe it. And she was like, no, this is not correct. We're going to get sick. I need my scarf. And now, now that she's been here since 2012, when she goes back, she's like, yeah, we need air conditioning there. Because the parents, they have an AC, but they really don't even use it.
It's so funny you say that because, like, when I went to the Netherlands, Nikki's father is, like, fully against the AC. Mm-hmm. Like, fully against it. Same sort of experience where you're going to get sick, this, that, and the other. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, spend 2 weeks in Florida, big dog. You're buying an AC.
No, it's like technically it's better to sleep when it's cooler. So it's like, but that's the way it is. And then we go over there during the winter and it's cold in the house, and I'm like, you want to turn on the heater? And they kind of do that stuff, But now that she's been here, she's definitely westernized, quite a bit for sure.
My family was just in Italy like last week, and
I saw some pictures from your uncle, yeah.
Yeah, and like my dad, my grandparents, everyone was over. My dad is like, as I don't know, he's as Western as it comes in terms of, like, he was like, the county fair was going on in New York at the same time, and he's like, I don't even want to go to Italy. I want to stay home and go get steak sandwiches at the county fair.
They were eating at McDonald's in Italy.
Literally,
I was laughing.
Literally, yeah. So. And he came back, I'm like, so how was it? And he's like, well, the food was all right. They don't put any salt in their bread, and they got no AC anywhere. I'm like, yeah, Dad, it's Italy. Like, it's not that hot either.
Their food is good though. At all the places I've been in the world, I mean, I lived there for a while, but I think that was my favorite food, and the people were really, really good there. But it's definitely it's old school.
Yeah, sure. No, I agree. I think the food is the best. But they were, my family's pretty picky. If you ever been to dinner with you've been to dinner with Richie, so
Yeah, oh yeah.
No cheese, no salt, no pepper, no garlic, nothing. But that's cool. Well, so we wanted to get into a little bit, just talking about kind of what your experience has been like this year, coming back to racing. I think James, we were talking this morning, like what really led you to wanting to get back into the series and that kind of thing.
Why?
Well, I mean, I've been. It's not something that I haven't wanted to do. For a long time. There hasn't been a ton of opportunities. In the States since I retired, and there's been a couple in Europe, but I just honestly I don't want to travel that much. Just too much. And then with this project that came on, talking with Ducati about some stuff last year, and they had kind of asked me to do a couple things, and I said, well, it's, if there's more to it, I said, I'm interested. I just don't want to do one or two things and then kind of, because I have a good relationship with Yamaha from the past. And then he said, well, wait a second, because there's something going on. Let me make a call, and called me back the next day. And he said, would you, how do you feel about running a team, like being a manager of a new Ducati team? And I was like, not really, not. I just said, I said, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And I said, running budgets and putting that stuff together, I was like, no. But when it comes to working with the riders and just kind of working on the whole atmosphere of the team and the riders talking with the mechanics, with the engineers, and just making sure that feedback is just interpreted the best way possible, I said, I think I can help and work with the riders and stuff like that, and they said, yeah, let's do it then. So that's kind of how it started, and then it was a little bit more than that in the very beginning, and then now it's kind of Richie's in the team running stuff, doing a great job as a manager, and it's kind of let me get back to what I wanted to do more in the team and what my strengths are, for sure.
Did you have when you were racing, did you ever imagine wanted to do something like that? I know some guys, it's like they're kind of, you know, they want to retire and then they see themselves being involved still in the sport. Is that something you were?
Yeah, I mean, I was never against it. I never thought, you know, I definitely knew I wasn't like the manager type person for sure. But, you know, when it comes to like looking at, you know, 5 years and looking at the performance part of the team and like some of those decisions and just the path, and again with the riders and all that, you know, I felt like I've got some knowledge, you know, for sure, and if it could work out, it could. And then, you know, after racing, retired and took a big break, which I needed, you know, after racing that long. And then, you know, with this opportunity coming up, it's, you know, sponsors are great, Ducati's great, the riders we've got, Graham, like the whole package was just kind of was perfect. And, you know, I'm sitting at home and I talked with the wife and she said, you know, you can only pick up so many sticks on the property and do so many burn piles. So, you know, get your ass out there and do something for a few years. So, and since I've been back, I mean, it's been awesome. You know, I didn't really know how it was going to go coming back and not seeing a lot of people and being in the paddock, but it seems like it's gone really well and I've enjoyed it. I mean, honestly, some of the most fun weekends I've had, you know, besides just doing family stuff, has been, all right, we're going back to the track, you know, and it is fun being back in what I know and the people I'm used to being around.
What is it like managing, you know, 3 riders that are completely different, really, right? You've got PJ, Kayla,
Yeah.
and then obviously Corey, who's 6'9". I mean, what's that? I mean, what's that like managing? There's, you know, 3 different personalities there,
Yeah.
3 different riding styles, and how are you able to kind of like pick it apart and really, you know, work with those riders?
Yeah, it's that's been and I wouldn't say that's been tough. It's been a little bit, you know, different. You know, just learning how to do it. I think, you know, it's been well. Corey can kind of probably speak to it a little bit more, but you know, you're right. It's like, but I was in Kayla's shoes before, you know, and then I was kind of in all 3 of their shoes at one point. And you know, with Kayla, it's kind of, she's got a lot of talent, you know, doing really good things, but she kind of needs, you know, a good circle of people around her and stuff like that. So just kind of, you know, teaching her that there's a totem pole to the whole racing thing, and you're a quarter of the way up there, and you've just got to keep looking at things like a progression. And with Corey, you know, he's seasoned, he knows what he's doing. Same thing with PJ. So it's not necessarily ever saying like, hey, you know, ride the bike like this or do that. Like, that's not my job, because all the guys and girls, you know, they can
Sorry.
no, they can but they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, oh, you need to do this or do that. It's just kind of like, what are you lacking? What are you not feeling? This is what I'm seeing. You know, can you go about it this way, or is it going to mess this up? And, you know, just kind of listening to some of the stuff I have to say. I've told all 3 of them that, you know, there's times that I'm going to say stuff that, you know, you might not agree with. You might agree with a lot of it or some of it, and you don't have to take all of it. You know, I mean, you need to do what makes you comfortable. But, you know, just giving them confidence and just like talking about Mid-Ohio with Corey. Had a bad weekend with the bike, and we had a lot of issues, and it happens sometimes. But I also knew that he was riding really good, and that's a good track for him. And there was a time in qualifying where it was like, hey, you might get about 6 minutes to put a lap in, and this lap counts for your race. So I kind of told him, I was like, this is when, even though it's a lot of the bike's problem, we're trying to figure it out with the team. If the bike shows up and it's good to go, I was like, you need to do your job now. Like, you need to pull it out and you know, take that little extra risk to get you where you need to be in qualifying for the race. And he rode incredible that weekend. It's just the bike wasn't there, and there were some things going on. So just like I said, every now and then being there for the confidence part of it, or just, you know, seeing some of the little things, or just asking a little bit of different questions and, you know, setup or what they're feeling with the bike that maybe gets it a little bit better, you know.
And did you, now that you've kind of stepped into this role, did you have somebody when you were racing that was kind of in the role that you were in, or are you trying to fill that gap that maybe you didn't have?
No, that's where I tell people I was extremely fortunate with kind of the people I had around me. Growing up, even, you know, from a young age, it was people in CMRA, some older riders. And then when I got to Suzuki, it was Kevin Swans. He was there. And then just Tom Houseworth, my crew chief, he was very seasoned and he knows, what he's doing. And that's where, a lot of times there were, someone like Kevin, he would say something, kind of 50% of the stuff he would say, I really would take it. And then some of the stuff, it was like, that won't maybe quite work, but I get what you're saying. And he was never trying to say, oh, everything I say, do it. It was just like you take bits and pieces, but also just having him sit next to me, it gives you confidence, talking to someone like that, and even if they're just agreeing with you on something. So, no, I was super fortunate with kind of the people, the circle I had around me growing up, and that's what also made the difference for me to be able to achieve the stuff I did.
Now, working with Kayla, obviously, she's at a point in her career where she's pretty malleable, right? You can have like a lot of influence on her and kind of change things. There are things that, you having some perspective now that you've retired and you're kind of a little more older and wise.
Yeah.
I don't want to call you old, but
yeah. I'm getting there. I'm 40 now.
But I mean, in terms of just like lessons learned, like, and you've been able to reflect a little bit now, is there things that you're kind of coming back with her that you would have done differently or wish you could have done differently when you were a kid?
I honestly, when I look back at everything, I don't think there's many things that I would have changed, like for me. Not saying I did everything perfect either, but I mean, the progression I had with how Suzuki was and how they kind of sent me through that deal was pretty much what you would want to do. So, with her, it's just kind of when she gets flustered or she gets mad that she wants to do something more, I'm like, hey, you've got to remember, like I said, it's a totem pole, and it's like you're 17, and no matter what you think or what you do this weekend, whether you ride, like the Ridge, she had an incredible weekend. After that weekend, I had to kind of tell her, like, hey, now we know when you're comfortable what you can do and all that kind of stuff, but it's not always going to be like that every weekend. And you've just got to keep progressing, because at the end of this year, you're going to be better than you were middle of the year. Middle of next year, you're going to be better, and you're going to keep making those steps till you're 20, 21, and then it starts you're refining everything. But, she just has to know that and trust the process, because what she's doing lap time wise, it's incredible. I mean, if you weren't in the class and Jake and PJ and Schultz, she probably would have won a couple races last year if you look at times, like at the Ridge and some of those deals. So she's doing really good, and the class kind of changed, but it's in the better for her, So for instance, too, Road Atlanta, when she crashed in the rain, like having two daughters, I wanted to red flag the race, and just send everything back, because she had a shot at the podium 100%. But qualifying, she didn't quite get where she needed to be, so it made it tough. And I just told her, I was like, listen, some weekends, they're character building weekends. And I said, what it's going to change is when you're 21 and you face that again, and you just got to bank it, And I said, everybody that knows, me and, the Richie Alexander and Graham and Paulo Ciabatti, they see what you're doing right now. So it's like, you've just got to keep going up the steps and just getting better. And that's it,
Now, obviously, people that know Kayla personally, her dad's a big portion of where she's been able to get to. Obviously, probably the only reason she's gotten on a bike was because of her dad.
For sure.
You can relate to that probably a little bit just with your relationship with your mom and how close you guys were. Do you see any kind of similarities in their relationship and your relationship with your mom, and how that kind of, can be a benefit or sometimes a detriment?
Yeah, I mean, having a close parent's always going to be tough. I mean, like I said, my mom was with me forever, and my dad was, but he was busy working, and he would come to some races. Mom was always there, and the difference was Mom couldn't tell me how to ride a bike or anything like that, where David can in some ways, and he's done a great job getting her to this point. And then now I even had the discussion with him before the year. I was like, hey, I get it. Because I said I had my mom, she was with me. I said, I understand that whole aspect. I'm on your side. But I said, you've just got to truly understand now, like with this team, she's got the right people around her, So just everybody needs to be in their lanes and do everything they can. And he's been great, to work with this year. And sometimes he's obviously helped us in the team, get a lot of stuff done. And I think that for me, since I went through that, if I have to deal with a rider, with a parent, like I just understand more of the situation on how to keep it, where it needs to be. Because sometimes it's not great, sometimes it's fine, and we've had great experience, from it this year, but it doesn't always go smooth. But with me, again, for my mom, it was one of those deals where she was just more on the manager side of stuff. And a lot of people hear some stories because of me and Matt and, button heads and all that kind of stuff. But in the same time, I always told people, like, if my mom threw a rev, it was because I told her to, because there was something going on that wasn't correct, but now as a parent, having 2 daughters, like, I could only imagine, having a kid doing what we did and y'all do, and you're just wanting the best for them. So it's a fine line, it is.
And when you say stay in your lane, is that like, it's so mixed, right? Because you want to support 100%, and racing isn't fair, and life isn't fair. And so when you mean like stay in your lane, is it mainly just massive support, and as you transition, she's transitioned into a bigger team, and like you said, there's a lot of people around her that are now the right people, and is it that hard part of letting go a bit?
It is, and it's also, it's kind of like, hey, she's got Corey and PJ's data to look at, she's got these engineers, she's got Richie as a team manager. She has me vouching for her when things are going good. If it's going to another team in Europe in 3 years or whatever it is, she's got Paulo Ciabatti in her lane. So all the circle of people are right there. So it's kind of like, hey, whenever there's discussions or anything, like, you come to me, and then I'll deal with the riders. And same thing even with, having Richie on the team, being, his uncle. It's like sometimes you don't, talking with family, it's not easy, because it can go good and it can go bad. So it's kind of like, my position is, come to me, I'll talk with the riders and trying to, keep that all even. And I think it's been great this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's been good. I think it's been interesting watching Kayla, like, with the amount of pressure she puts on herself and stuff. How do you talk to somebody like that at that age? Because obviously, you know how kids are, because we're young ones. You don't want to hear shit, really. So.
Yeah, it's not always easy, for sure. But the thing is, she's got such a good head on her shoulders, where I think, if you talk to her the right way, she understands a lot, and maybe over analytical sometimes, but that's going to pay off for her later. It's just, like I told her, even with training, I'm like, we've got her kind of on a pretty good program this year, but I've told her, I'm like, it can be more, yes, but I said, you're 17. And I was like, with what you're doing and all the stuff, you don't need to be more, because you've got that youth in you, and you don't want to get burnt out. So like this winter, we're going to be doing a lot more stuff, and I said, you just got to, like I said, because if I gave her the same stuff she needs to do this winter, she would have done it last winter, and it's just too much, and she doesn't need everything yet. So just trying to, like, keep that ramp going up consistently. You don't want to get burnt out. And then there was one weekend too, like at Ohio, where there's a couple moments that happened that just flustered her, and that's fine, and Sunday morning, we went and sat down, and I said, listen, this is one of those times too where a rider, they've got to take responsibility too. And if they say the bike's set up for this and you're riding it like this and you're not getting everything out of it and it's not working, well, it's not working because you're not riding it where it's set up to be, the pace that it's set up to be at. So, like, let's reset, let's get back into it. Everything you're doing is so good. There's going to be these kind of moments, but every now and then you've got a rider's just got to go in and say, okay, I've got to reset and go back, to flatline and take off again. And she was able to do that. And it's just, there's, because there's emotions that build up for any racer, and it's easy to get sometimes upside down. And one of the most important things that House would tell me on bad days, even at GP, like on the grid, it's like, hey, you realize when you were 14, 12 years old, what you wanted to do for a living. You're here now, so go have fun. Because when you're having fun riding the bike, that's when you're fast. It doesn't matter what bike you're on, what class you're on, where you're at. If you're not having fun, shit's not going to work the same. Like, you're not pushing it the same. You're not having that feeling. So the main thing is having fun. So sometimes, like, when she's got a little bit too flustered, it's like, hey, calm down. Like, this weekend's not going to be the make it or break it, but you just got to reset the mechanism, just go back out and do the business. You know?
You saying that now, was that always your perspective though? Because I think everybody kind of knows you.
Yeah.
It's kind of the serious, hard ass kind of guy. I mean, did you actually have a lot of fun when you at that age, and then obviously a little bit later is when it got even more serious?
Yeah, I mean, I did have a ton of fun. With me though, I joke about it. That like when I raced that I had Asperger's basically, but and I'm not making fun of it. Like I think I had, and I probably still have some of it. I mean, I'm a different cat too, but it's I enjoyed it, but with me, I was always looking at the next thing, and it wasn't that. It's like even living in Lake Como, like I enjoyed it back then. I enjoy it way more now, thinking of the memories and all that kind of stuff, because man, when you're at the level when you start winning some championships and you're kind of get to that top level, it's work, and there's just everybody's always expecting you to keep doing it, and always just banging out results, and it's it's not easy. So I mean, I enjoyed it, but I was such a person that I wanted to control everything I could, from diet to training to when I flew in. And if it wasn't something, and that's what I think that people now, if they get around me, they see a different side. Because when I was racing, I mean, there's only so many years to do it. And I was like, I'm not going to leave anything on the table that when I retire, I look back. Because I would see 40, 50-year-old guys that, if I would have done this, I could have done that. And I'm like, man, I've got one shot to do this. And, I want to win. And if it's not going to help me win, I don't have time for it, because it's taking something away. And, again, it didn't always come across the smoothest to everybody in the paddock, but it wasn't that I wasn't having fun and didn't like it. I was just trying to do everything I could to do to win. But then you would have the people that it would get back to you. They would say this or say that, and then they put chips on your shoulder. So it makes some stuff worse, but it wasn't really because I had anything against anybody in the paddock. I just wanted to win, and that's all. And I was racing Matt, So.
Do you think now though that you wish it was less focused just on that, looking back?
With me, I don't know how I could do it. I don't know. I don't think I could. I think I could have a little bit more fun than I did, but I still think I would take it just as serious. I mean, even right now, but if I'm out of it, I'm able to enjoy it and just that's just my personality with racing. I mean, because if I'm going to race, I want to win and I want to control everything I can, and it's just the way it is.
Do you look at it now? I think a lot of people have talked about racing, supercross, road racing, all those sports, like everyone's a little more like buddy, and everyone seems to be having a little more
I don't
fun.
agree with it.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Well, because again, like I can like take for instance Jamie Hacking. Me and him traveled the country together, and we trained together. Neil Hodgson kind of was like in our little group, and we trained together. Just because I had a good relationship with them, and me and Matt didn't back then, I raced them the exact same. Like I'd race, if you're my best friend, I'm probably going to actually be a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
So that really didn't change for me. And I just think that in racing, you've got to respect everybody. And that's what, if you look back at all my interviews, even when whoever I was racing, you've got to praise everybody, because that person that you might beat by 30 seconds one race, it can be 10 races later and then he beats you and you made a comment on something about him and it doesn't make you look good at all. So, I mean, I always respected all the competitors, but I think it's good to have a rivalry somewhere. And then, you're racing. Like it's down to, I've always told people, like, when you're 5 laps to go in a race, like it's who wants it the most and who's willing to like jump on that sword of an analogy, to make it happen. And you see like the top 4 guys in GP when they pull over in turn 1 and they're all giving each other hugs and stuff. A lot of them are friends off the track. I get it, but like I'm a little bit more serious when it comes to competition than that.
And you say like going into those last 5 laps, what was the motivation for you? You say you wanted to win, but was there anything deeper than that? I mean, everybody wants to win.
Yeah, I just, I had growing up, for whatever reasons, there was there were just a couple reasons, a couple times when I was younger and even 16, 17 that I kind of felt overlooked, I guess, at some point. And you just kind of get a couple chips on your shoulders naturally. And then, I had my mom as my manager, and there was always like some people making comments about like that. So it kind of got to the point where it's like, all right, I'm gonna show y'all, and I just, like I said, I think it was something the way I was very serious about it, and I just kind of had to do everything I could to control everything to give myself the best chances,
And do you think, like, at what point, in your childhood, I guess, did you realize that you had that in you, like that
Dog.
that dog in you?
That dog in you.
I mean, I would say, probably about 12.
Really?
Oh
like
wow.
that. Yeah,
That's young.
And
That's really
just
young.
from racing, or like as like a kid on the playground kind of deal. Like you just knew you had that intensity.
Were you tripping kids?
It was, no, it was
Taking his
just
lunch money or what?
it was just how I was kind of raised on bikes and stuff, and just kind of that mentality. Like even when I was 9, 10 years old and I was riding XR100s, my mom's ex-boyfriend, the one that got me into motorcycles, it was lap times. It was like boot camp, and then I think what I did too, that I don't think a lot of people do it as much now, is like I watched tape. I watched all the GP races from 90, 91, 92, 93, and I studied like all the top riders' racecraft, from Chandler to Miguel, Matt, Swantz, Rainey, and just watched everybody and tried to understand, the best way of passing people. I would do mock races on TT super motard bikes with people, and just kind of, I always like reveled in that whole battle part of like the end of a race. And, I do think that when it came down to the last 5 laps of a race, most of the time I was able to kind of get, on top of whoever I was battling. And it's not always just being the faster person. I think a lot of it too is just looking at the passes, understanding, where to make easier I mean, we've talked about it obviously this year a couple times, where there's a couple parts on the track where I think some people, they just always look at it like, oh, I've got to pass this dude on the brakes. I've got to fully pass him, or I've got to do this, and I'm hanging on by a thread. But then, again, like talking with Corey and talking with the riders, even Ohio and a couple other tracks, it's like, hey, this turn and this here turn, if you're behind somebody and you just slightly set up a little bit different, and then when you come out of this one, you don't think about the corner coming up. You actually think that it's going to be a straightaway, because all your job is to beat them to that point. If you're next to them at that point, you've got the corner. But a lot of people, I don't think they look at it always like that. It's like, yeah, throw away 2 or 3 tenths of the lap time, but you can make an easy pass. You're just slowing everybody down. And I just think that not many people look at it in every angle of that, and you can make passes easier than you think. You really can. But I think that was a strong point.
And is that something, you took through your whole career? When did you kind of really look at that? Did somebody teach you that, or was that self-taught?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, but I do think it was a little bit more self-taught, just by watching like the best battles and watching how people line people up, and because again, it's something where you have a couple corners, that come together, where it's like if the corner before, if you set up just a foot on the right of somebody, and then you come out and you go to the foot of the left somebody, and then it's a double apex corner where they're fading out, that gives you the line just to stay tight and stay in there. So there's just, you gotta look at it, kind of setting up geometry lines a little bit before, and it can make passes way easier.
What comes to mind is I watched a video of you and Hog at Nassen, and now after you see some people passing in, I don't know what, it's like 3 corners to go, but you set it up. You set it up through the long right. You got a good run through the kink, and you made a pass in the chicane, the last little chicane on the access road, which was, pretty ballsy, and was able to block and win the race. But what's interesting though is what you're saying now and talking about it, and then now you see there is passes that are happening there. I'm sure there was before you, but like it's interesting, like just being able to watch that race and then go, wow, okay, yeah. So that's what you were thinking of, and that was on the Sterile Guard Yamaha.
And what's funny is we would, I had a lot of help too. My '09 year, I was good friends with Andrew Pitt and Sebastian Chapontier, and they would always walk the track with me because all those tracks were new to me in '09, and we were walking the track at Assen with them, and I was like, I'd played that a lot on video games, and that's also what helped too on learning a lot of tracks. But we're walking out of that fifth gear corner, and I was like, hey, can you sneak up on the inside right here? Is that possible? And Andrew was like, well, I mean, if you get a run through there, but he said there's going to be a big bump, because again, it was where a road came in, and that race, honestly, it looked spectacular, but those passes and plans, that was not really planned because I'd left it late. I was trying to get ahead 2 laps before, and I'd messed up opportunities. So, with Leon, it was that close pass through those 3 turns, and we kept it clean and fast and didn't really battle, and then caught up to Hagen. I was kind of like, the problem is if I didn't pass him where I did, the left after that, he was much faster than me. But I was way better on the brakes and in the chicane, but I didn't think I was going to be close enough. So I kind of had to make it work. I got a run out of, 5th gear in that corner, and I just said, I'm going straight to the inside, and made it work, But that was a pass that was more a little bit seat of the pants, last moment type stuff. It wasn't really planned, but a lot of the other ones, battling with other people, I think it was down to just Racecraft that allowed me to get it done,
Going back to growing up, you said CMRA. A lot of people don't realize that's or maybe know of it, but that was a pretty big club racing series. Still exists, right? Still down here in the South. Not to the extent I think it was. How much of those kinds of things, like having that type of network, and obviously there's a ton of racers back then that came from that area. Talk about that, because I think that's something that's definitely missing nowadays from our sport. How critical was that for you? To expedite how quickly you kind of came up.
Oh, it was huge. I mean, it was, I was on a 125 and a 250, and I was getting a race against, guys like John Hayner, Joe Prisciano, Ty Howard, Sam McDonald. Sam McDonald was an old factory, superbike racer in the kind of the late 80s, 90s, and then Otis Lance was there. You had a really strong group of guys, and then you would have like the Valvoline guys like Michael Martin and Lopez and Hayes, and even Colin Edwards would come do like an amateur race when he rode for the factory team. Wow. He showed up with a YZF 750, set the track record at Oak Hill. So it was the guys that I got to cut my teeth racing against when I was basically 12 to 15. It was another level than I think it is right now. And that helped a lot because they were the ruthless racers, like the backyard XR100, stuff it in there type guys. So I think they probably cut me a little bit of slack being that young, but I still got to race against some really hard dudes, and that helped a lot.
What do you think why were they showing up? Was it like for fun, or was there a lot of money back then on club racing?
Yeah, back then you had contingency money that was big. I think someone like a Ty Howard or something, he would show up with a Cowie and a Suzuki, and I think he could pretty much make 10 grand a weekend, 12 grand a weekend. So he could make $150,000 traveling the U.S. just doing amateur racing, and he was. I would say those guys they're all the top amateurs, and then back then they were probably all fast enough to kind of be 15th in an AMA Supersport race, like with the top field with Miguel and all those guys. So they were really good, and like I said, it was just perfect time for me to be able to race against them and cut my teeth against that type of talent.
And back then though, there was big programs through like Suzuki, Yamaha. Oh, yeah. I don't know if Honda had a program for club racing, but I definitely remember Suzuki
and Cowie were huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was at the end of it kind of when Robbie Jensen was there and still making some big money when I was coming up through, and he was kind of doing the racing 8 races a weekend, just making money. And we see that in Europe, they've kind of adopted that. Okay. Right? Not in club racing specifically, but with these big training camps. And do you think that something like we need club level racing stronger again, or is that, I mean, that's hard to do without the contingency and stuff like that.
I think Weir is still doing, fairly well for sure. But yeah, I mean, it would be, I think that would help everything for sure. I remember back in the, when you're talking mid 90s and looking at club stuff and GNF stuff and like the Suzuki Cup finals, and it was just, there's a lot of good stuff going on. I think there's a lot of stuff building back towards that now, so hopefully it can get back to where it needs to be, because that's the grassroots of it, the important part for sure.
And so when you started actually riding, you're riding dirt bikes. I think we talked about this like dinner a couple races ago. What actually got you on a dirt bike? Your mom's boyfriend? What was the reason you kind of got into it?
Yeah, so he started, they met, he had a dirt bike and we were kind of messing around, and then he got me a PW50 when I was 5. And then when I was 7, he showed up with YSR 50s, and he's like, I'm going to race, we're having fun. He was probably, 30 at the time or something, just having fun, seeing him race stuff. So they go out, take rider school, go race. I see the bike and I'm kind of like, man, the thing fits me. I'm 7. So they put me in a parking lot, and I had motocross gear and I had rollerblade knee pads.
Yes.
For real.
Yeah.
So, and I started just kind of like learning and dragging my knee a little bit. And then he goes and does rider school and does his first race. And he had bought 2 YSR 50s from the Haydens, because they were there racing at Oak Hill. So then he had 4, and they were doing some endurance racing, and I turned 8, and he called CMRA, and he talked him into letting me be underage and taking rider school and all that kind of stuff. So that's how it started. I started riding, racing YSR 50s when I was 8, and then I just kept kind of progressing up.
And what was your mom's thought process on that? Obviously, you being a dad now, would you?
She was worried. I don't remember it being horrible, but I can barely remember anything back then too. So, she wasn't bad. It really, I think she handled it pretty well until I had a couple pretty good accidents, like when I was 12 and 14. And
what was your first big one?
I think it was when I was 12. I had a RS 125 high side, or C's top of third gear. So right when I rolled out, the thing pitched me and it broke my foot, I think in 4 places. Had to get another 125, and that was the first big crash I had, for sure. So
did you reevaluate after that or no?
No. There was only one time when I kind of thought about stopping racing. That was when I was 14. My teammate passed away. Thought about stopping then, but then that was short-lived, and I was like, no, I can't. Like, if I stop, he's going to be pissed at me and stuff like that. So kept racing, and then I had the big Daytona crash. That wasn't easy. Had some thoughts a little bit back then, but still wasn't enough to stop racing. So
when did you get on your first real team? Was that Valvoline, or were you on riding 125s and 250s? Was that were they real teams or just kind of put together?
So 125 and 250 was basically just me and a mechanic, and my mom and Keith and Dad and that kind of whole setup. And then, but like when I was on a 125, 12 and 13, I started riding a 250. I started racing it when I was 14. I started riding when I was 13. And then I got on the 250. Then when I was riding the 250 when I was 14, I started riding a GSXR 750 at the track. But it was just stock, street tires on it, just kind of learning the size and everything. And then when I turned 15, that's when I signed with Valvoline Suzuki. And they gave me a 600. Same thing, I was riding 600 and 750, kind of both deals. And then, formerly USA when I was 15, Wera stuff. And then 16 started, AMA.
So you basically, from 7 years old, got on a road race bike to then 15, you're signed to a team.
Yeah.
Actually signed, and you were getting paid at that point?
15, yeah. I was getting not a lot, but a little bit.
Yeah.
So
do you think, obviously comparing to now, right? As a parent,
yeah.
You can't even, if you could hear that was a possibility as a trajectory, it would make it a lot more realistic or feasible for you to get your kid involved. You're like, okay, well,
yeah,
there's a chance within the next, in your case, it was less than 10 years and you were making a paycheck.
Yeah.
Obviously, do you think makes it a bit more difficult to entice people to get involved now?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure it doesn't help too much.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess
for
what I'm
sure.
asking is like, was your mom looking at it like, oh, this is actually like a career path for him because of the fact that
For
you're
sure.
15 making money?
Yeah, when I was pretty much 14, I would say, like with the landscape of racing and what you knew about people making money, as in the lowest paid factory guy and all this kind of stuff. Like when I was 14, the decision was, I'm going to be a motorcycle racer. You don't know how good you're going to be, and you don't know how much money you're going to make and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, that's going to be my career, you know? So that's when, honestly, at 14, kind of motorcycle racing was a bit more than school for me, you know, traveling a lot, and all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, I finished, stopped school and after my sophomore year, because we were just traveling so much. And
When you say stop school, you mean like go to homeschool?
yeah, homeschool, yeah. And then because I tell people this story, and it's crazy now because I have kids, but it's literally how I looked at racing back then. When, you know, because my dad, he was for racing, but he was also like, until I was making good money, he was like, you've got to have a backup plan. I was like, I get it, but I said, racing's it, you know, and I said, I can make money doing it. And this was right when I was like 15-ish, and the bigger money was going to slowly kind of start coming in. And I just told him, I said, Dad, if I can't make money racing motorcycles, it's because I'm in a wheelchair. So I was like, I have to put everything into it, and that's it. Because again, we know that I'm good enough to have a career now racing. You don't know how good you're going to be, but it's going to be that. Or if I can't do it, I can't go to work because I'm hurt, you know. And that's the way I, you know, being that age. And I can't imagine being a parent now and my kid telling me that. I'd be like, really? Like, you know. So, but that's the way my thought process was back then.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that serious.
And when you say lowest, when you guys were looking at the lowest factory salary, what kind of numbers was that? Like then?
It's, you know, back in like, I would say 2000, you know, I would say the lowest guys were probably, you know, probably $200,000 to $300,000, something like that.
Hopefully there's not too many people depressed now. Yeah, listening. It's not like that anymore.
No, and,
Yeah.
and again, it's hard to say exactly what
Yeah.
the lowest ones,
Yeah.
but you knew that like the top guys were getting over $1 million, you know, and then the lower, but it was enough. Like, that's more than what I'm going to make doing this type of a job.
Yeah.
So,
And that was like I mean, there was like 10 guys, so there was like you could be 10th as a factory guy
Yeah.
because there's so many motorcycles out there.
Yep.
I mean, that's insane. You know, thinking now like you could be finishing 10th, making a couple $100,000.
Oh yeah.
I mean, different times for sure, but
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And then you said your stepdad was the one who kind of got you involved in it. What was your relationship with your actual dad at that time?
It was good, yeah. No, everything was, it was just, you know, my mom and dad got divorced when I was 3, and then he lived 2 hours away. You know, Keith was obviously there, and you know, there was never any like sour between Keith and, you know, Keith he was never my dad. You know, he was just somebody that obviously helped support racing, was with my mom. Dad would come to the races when he was there. Like, it was all good. But, you know, Dad would kind of get the kids like every second weekend. We'd go to Dad's house kind of deal. And then he would come to the races. I mean, he even World Superbike, AMA, and MotoGP, he'd probably come to 5 races a year kind of thing. Talk to him every day. So he was always involved in it, but he just had no background racing, so he just didn't know as much, but he learned a lot, you know.
Yeah. How important do you think that dynamic was, that being a positive dynamic? Because obviously, you know, a lot of families, when they have that, go on divorce and whatnot.
Yeah,
it's
no, it
different.
was good. I mean, but my dad, he's a kind of a bit more like me too, just kind of quiet, and, you know, was just always supportive of it. Was never heavily against it at all. You know, again, when I was like 12 to 14, he was the one that would kind of pump the brakes, like, hey, we got to make sure, you know. But then once I was 15, 16, 17, it was like, okay, you know, you're doing your work. Like, you're doing the same work as most 30-year-olds are doing, because that's what I've also had to tell people too. And they're like, oh, you're retired when you're 29, or you retire when you're 35 if you go a little bit further. And I'm like, yeah, but the problem is like, take Kayla, for instance, and even you. the work that you were doing when you were 10 and 12 years old, that's the same work that like Tom Brady's doing in college, getting ready for NFL, or a med school person's doing at 25, getting ready for when they're 35 working. It's just, it's such an early career. People don't, most normal people, they just don't get that at 12 years old, you're actually doing work that's could be making you money, $2 million a year when you're 20. Like, it's really like that, so he was good with that. But no, the dynamic was always healthy, with our family, and always good.
Now, when you went pro, your mom, you said, was kind of like your manager figure. Was she like the one negotiating those deals? Like, how was that? Obviously, because you guys didn't have a background in racing. It's not like you like had a dad or somebody who was like, part of the community who kind of could guide you through that whole process. Yeah. So she had to learn just as much as you had to learn, I would imagine.
Yeah. But I was kind of lucky that, when I turned, because I signed with John when I was 15, which was really in essence with Suzuki. And then when I was 17, I signed with the factory team. So they had, their offer was good when I was like, this is huge for me when I'm 17. And, then you have your leather deals and stuff like that. And I was doing well enough that, the companies were kind of coming to us. So, and then you hear what this guy's getting paid over here and that guy's getting paid. So it wasn't so much having to really negotiate stuff. It was more just like, here's the offer. Okay, money-wise, we want a little bit more, or it's good. I send it off to my 2 lawyers to look at, So there wasn't a ton of managing in that aspect, like having to search for stuff or, do that stuff. So she, but she also is very smart when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, there wasn't really, I would call even a need for a manager back then. It was just having good lawyers looking over all the paperwork and doing that kind of stuff, which obviously saves you in the end. But it was a little bit of a special deal just because I was so wrapped in with Suzuki and they were wanting to keep me for a long term that everything was pretty much lining up.
Yeah. Now, like at that age, what was your mom doing? Was she working, or were you kind of like, were you supporting everything?
She was working up until I was pretty much like 15, 16. And then, she had been, I knew she was like $80,000 worth of debt kind of deal at that point.
From your racing.
Yeah.
Holy.
And then when I signed, but I told her, I said, listen, I'm going to make this work. Like, everything's going to be all right. Just, I got to get to this point. And then, when I signed my factory deal at the end of 2002, that's what basically allowed, paid her back. I was able to buy her a car, and she didn't have to work anymore, So that was it.
And when you signed that, was it a multi-year deal? Like, was it
yes.
When you're saying long term, what's kind of a long term deal?
I think it was a 2-year. That was 2003. It was like a 2-year with an option, and then my second deal was like a 3-year deal. I think something like that. So
at that age, when you're dealing with that kind of money, and obviously you said like your mom's able to not work, do you understand the kind of pressure, or did you feel any load on your shoulders at that point? Like you're kind of no.
It's just I didn't even, and honestly, I didn't really look at the money that much back then. Like I did, because I knew that she was already setting stuff up with my like CPA and doing SEP accounts and IRA and retirement stuff. So I knew that she had a plan of like, this much money needs to go to that stuff. And then what I learned early on is just like, if I had a contract in front of me and it said a number, I'd say, okay, half of that is what I get, because half of it, 30% of it, 35% of it's going to taxes, and 15% of it is like my lifestyle to live for the year. So I was like, basically half of that gets to go in savings, and the half of it's just blown, So, and that's the way it really was. So that's really the in-depth that I kind of looked at the numbers. I mean, I would look at all the contracts, but then it was kind of like, all right, now I just focus on racing. So I didn't really get into, the managing part, till I retired. And then after a couple years of doing that, I've got a couple good advisors with that, and now I manage everything with them, shortly after racing. But during racing, it was just kind of like, hey, I know there's this much coming in, and I'm kind of spending this much, and Yeah, I blew some money too. I mean, it's just the way it is. But I got everything out of my system too. So, so that was good. And then she did a great job setting everything up for long term.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably, you just hear so many stories, mostly more Hollywood kind of stuff.
Well, it'd be easy to. Yeah. I mean, if I didn't have my mom like setting everything up, I wouldn't be broke, but I would have less than half of what I've got now. I mean, it makes a big difference for sure.
Now, so when you actually got into the paddock and whatnot, right, you had already been kind of around a lot of guys. Was there like you were young, but was there other young guys with you that were kind of coming up? Like I know like, Hayden Gillen or whatever, like when there's a group of us that we all kind of came into at the same time. Were you by yourself because of how young you were?
No, I mean, like, Hopkins was coming up kind of at the same time, and Roger Lee was, Nicky was like 4 years older. So he was always in the class that I was going to. Like I would step into a class and he was leaving. So I never raced Nicky until we were in GP, never. But no, we had because Roger Lee Hayden, I was racing him at Road Atlanta in 1996 when we were 12, so we both, I think he was a pro a year before me. So no, there was a couple, there was a few up there.
Do you ever think about how much time, like you said that in 96, so that's almost 20 or 30 years? It's almost 30 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever think about how much time you've kind of spent with, the same group of people?
Oh, yeah.
Like I just think it's such an interesting thing to think about. Like, most people don't still spend a lot of time with the kids they went to, middle school with.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, that's kind of where we're at just because of how small of a world this is.
Just like even Chris Ulrich, he was back in, when I was like 12 at, Road Atlanta. I mean, I guess he would have been like 15 or 16 or something like that. And then fast forward to Mid-Ohio 3 weeks ago, me and him were going out in the safety car to look at the oil spill, and we were just driving it, and I just look over at him, I was like, would you imagine back in 96 that we'd be, so it's funny. And it's, but no, it's great. I mean, like I said, I spent, I needed some time off when I retired, but it was, but like I said, it was good to come back to the paddock and see there's still 75% of the paddock is the guys that I've kind of grown up with. And no, it's been a good one. It's fun to be around it.
And when you come back and look at the paddock, it's different in other ways, right? From back in AMA days.
Yeah.
What do you like about what's changed with it? Obviously with like social media is taking over crazy, and everything just looks a little bit different. But for you looking back and you say, hey, everything looks good, what does that really mean when you come back into the paddock?
No, I mean, everything, there's definitely a lot of stuff that's changed for sure, but then how they've kind of changed the way they're doing stuff for just the new demographics and just what everything's going on. I think it's great. It's just like the whole social media stuff like you were talking about. If we had that back in our day, well, I mean, first of all, there'd be some people in trouble too, but it would, no, it helps a whole lot. There's just an avenue that y'all are able to use that we weren't, which definitely helps out, and it's needed now. But no, I mean, I think just the way the paddock is in general and how everybody gets along and doing all that stuff. I mean, I think, like I said, it's great to be back and be a part of it again.
The social media thing, do you ever think about the fact that if it existed when you guys were racing, that the money on the table for the top guys would have been less because of the fact that I feel like now because of social media, companies are looking at their budgets and going, well, instead of just giving it to Ben Spies, we can give it to Ben Spies, but also 10 or 15 of these other guys on the internet who have a big following, and so you're not going to get as much.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever think about it in that context?
I don't know if I mean, that is a good question because it'd go one way or the other. I mean, back then, I don't know. I would think it would have been a positive. I don't think it would have changed any other stuff. I think it probably just would have been brought in more money. I think, but maybe it would have. It's hard to, with hindsight, it's just hard to see, like, if those companies knew that was happening, maybe they cut it down. Because just like with anything, when the economy happened, in all sorts of race, and the factories are able to come together and be like, okay, well, we can control it a little bit more now, So, yeah, I don't know how it would have changed. I mean, it would have been a positive thing, I think, in the end, but maybe it would have cut some of the money back in other ways. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. You said Nicky was like 4 years ahead of you at all times,
Yeah.
kind of, right? Was that kind of your benchmark?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember watching Nick, from the first time we were out at Oak Hill, and just, seeing him ride and just being in absolute awe. You're like, holy crap, this kid, he's on a TZ 250 at 13, 14, winning against all the thousands, and just the speed he had, you're just kind of like, wow. And then fast forward to later on, you're racing against him and stuff like that. But yeah, Nick was always somebody, I was kind of chasing, but I never could race against him, because Roger Lee is, he's older than me by, I think, a year and a half. So I just never got to race Nick, but he was always setting the benchmarks of what you kind of had to do,
Did you believe that you either had as much talent, or did you have to like work harder than say
work harder.
Always?
Yeah, Nick, I think Nick, in my opinion, had more talent. I think, again, like I worked as hard as I could. I mean, back, and I'm not just trying to say it, but like when I was racing, I just don't feel like anybody worked out as hard as I was doing, or they, maybe diet wise and just even masseuse type stuff. And it was an era where I was kind of lucky to be able to invest like money into myself to win. But I think, I was doing every single thing possible where I knew that there was nobody, at the last 5 laps of a race, if I was getting beat, it wasn't because they were fitter than me. It was because they were riding better or doing stuff like that. So yeah.
How'd you combat that mentality, kind of knowing that you or at least felt like you were always having to chase in terms of talent or whatever the case is?
You just always, just trying to keep being better. Just, training on the XR100s, working out in the gym, watching tape, and then just trying to attain everything too, where I think some younger riders coming up, they'll try to get to a level, too fast, or they'll try to skip steps when, I tell people it's like you just, once you get comfortable with something and you're trying to, it's like that last half second. And I'll even tell like someone like Corey sometimes, it's like, hey, it's a half tenth here and it's a half tenth there. Don't just try to break here and like get it all done. Just try to add it up, and then you get to the end of the lap and you're 0.7 up. And then you log that in and you keep at that pace for a long time, and then you just, you make those gradual steps. And that's what I feel like I did from like 16 to 19, better, not better than some, but I wasn't as fast as some in that age. Like when Nick was 16 to 19, he was quicker, kind of where I was in that pace. But then once we got to superbikes and up, I feel like I was as good. And it was because just the process I did was a little bit different, a little bit slower at first, but kind of logging all the information and retaining everything, for later.
All right, so we're about an hour in, so cut to our Law Tigers segment here. Law Tigers are America's motorcycle lawyers. As you know, they support motorcycle riders. But Ben, you've been around bikes for a little while now. What's your number one tech tip you'd give to a guy first time at the track or just getting on a bike for the first time?
First of all, you're not going to win any money. So I always tell people that. Just go have fun. And again, when you're new and you're getting on the track and you kind of get a little bit comfortable and you're wanting to go a little bit faster, and this goes from the beginner rider all the way to the best in the world, is just you get comfortable, you ride your pace, and then, if you're wanting to dial it up some, you just take the small increments. I just said it earlier, but, it's like if you're going to brake 10 foot later, let off the brake 10 foot sooner, pick up the gas 10 foot earlier, not 50 feet and 50 feet, just small changes. And then that allows you to kind of lock in what you're doing and that feeling and stuff like that. And just have fun. Like I said, even on a track day when there's a checkered flag, there ain't no podium and there's no bonus checks going out to anybody. So just have fun with it.
That's awesome. Appreciate that. And that's our Law Tigers tech tip. Like I said, Law Tigers are American motorcycle lawyers. Motorcycle accident isn't something you ever expect to have happen, but if it does happen, better be prepared. Give the Law Tigers a call, no cost to the riders, and they'll do their best to get you back on track as soon as can, or on the street as quickly as you can. 1-800-LAW-TIGERS. Appreciate it.
Lovely.
So yeah, we were talking about kind of your inspiration or kind of who you looked up to as you were coming through those ages of 14, 15, 16, turning pro. Obviously, we said benchmark wise was Nicky, but did you have like obviously Schwantz or somebody like that you kind of looked at as that's who I want to aspire to be?
Yeah, I mean, I looked up a lot to Schwantz and Colin Edwards. A lot with, Rainey and Doohan and Lawson and watching all those guys. I mean, they're all kind of the legend idols for sure. But I would say Kevin and Colin were kind of the two top guys that I looked at. And then again, just kind of, I would look at all the top guys and look at their strengths, and just kind of, because it was kind of like, hey, I want to ride like Kevin, and I want to have that tenacity and all that stuff and that talent, but I don't want to hit the ground as much as him. I want to be like Wayne, as in how Clockwork and him and Lawson were, and just kind of understanding how they rode the bike differently and trying to, study it and just put it to use.
When you talk about riding styles, and you also had kind of a
Different
unique riding style. So when I hear you talk about you studied and looked at all of them, how did you really how did you get your riding style? I mean, was it something that was supernatural? And then obviously the elbows, like, was that just something that was really comfortable for you to do? Or is that something you did on purpose?
It was, honestly, it's something that, I mean, riding style wise, I've always told people that just kind of, you need to do what is naturally, what you feel is good. Obviously now with the way the bikes are, I think kind of the head down and the shoulders kind of pulled over, helping the bike turn. That definitely is kind of the newer style. But back then, a lot of different things could work. And with me, I remember, I came from GP bikes, and then I did a lot of flat track training. So I kind of always had that posture with my elbows up. And I didn't race flat track, but that's all I did for riding. I had a TT course and a big flat track, and did all that stuff. And then there was a bike when I was 17 riding for Richard Stamboli. It was a Formula Extreme 1000, and that's back when they had no TC. They were animals. I mean, animals. And I could not feel the front end, and it was because it was my first time on a real bike with super stiff triple clamps, the big Öhlins forks, and I also just wasn't riding quite at a level where I was pushing it to the max. And I just couldn't feel anything. Couldn't feel anything in the front end, so I started riding with my elbows up just because I was literally bracing, like waiting for the thing to tuck, or just didn't feel comfortable with it, and that's kind of how it stuck. And then, I just kind of, the faster I went, I started like pulling my upper body down a little bit more, and then now what's crazy is a lot of people have that style. I mean, it's almost everybody, like in GP and some in World Superbike, not all of them, but I don't think it's anything because of what I did, but it's just the way the bikes evolved too. And I think I was just one of the first ones that kind of went towards that. But I've just, like I said, I've told you, see how Doohan sat on a bike. You saw Schwantz. You've seen people like, Jean-Philippe Rougier, who he was up dragging his elbows back in the, early 90s. It's more just the comfort and being able to ride the bike as hard as you can and have that feel.
Do you think you say that you couldn't really feel the bike when you rode on the Stamboli bike? Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard that even moving into like Yoshimura, the super bikes that were insanely hard to ride at a slow pace. Mm-hmm. What was that, and how did you break through or adapt to be able to ride it hard enough to feel it?
I think a lot of people don't realize how difficult super bikes are to ride and how stiff they are. A lot of people that they're pretty good on a super stock bike, they're like, oh man, if I had his bike, I'd do this. I mean, if you had my bike, you'd crash in turn 1 or 2 because the forks are like locked. Like like one example, Greg White, he rode well, he tells his story.
5 minutes of fame. Here you go, Greg.
I'm not,
Brace yourself.
I'm not throwing him under the bus. He said this, but
Is this the same Greg White, the 5-time WERA amateur national champion?
Yes. Yeah.
I hope this is the Laguna story or something.
Yeah, it is. So he jumped on my Superstar. I won the title early, so I got off the bike finally, and he comes and jumps on it, and he wears the same custom leathers I had. They're obviously a lot bigger, but
obviously.
And I was weighing 162 back then at that time. I think he was more like 200-ish,
262.
Yeah, and he even said that, like, he couldn't even make the suspension move. He couldn't even get it. It was way too stiff for him. And it just shows that, when you're going a certain pace, it's not about how strong you are or anything like that. You're just using force and whatever it is. And a super bike compared to a super stock bike is so much more. I mean, you have the linkage, the swing arm, the triple clamps, the chassis, everything is so stiff. And if you're not riding it at the speed it's designed to be, you can't feel anything. And they're horrible. I mean, they don't have the weight transfer that a super stock bike has. And for me, I jumped on those and was better after being a year on the Stamboli Extreme bike. And but I just wasn't pushing it, to the level of everything felt like just perfect. I just the front end was a little bit vague and not slow on it, but just wasn't at home completely. And then we changed a spec in the fork from 05 season to 06. And I'll never forget it. We were at Fontana and went out and dropped like 0.8 of a second. And I was just like dialed at the lap record, just like did 4 or 5 laps. And I came in to Tom and I said, listen, if we can keep this feeling, I said, I don't know what's changed and where I'm at in the stroke or what I'm feeling, but if I can have this feeling at all the tracks, I said, we can win the championship. And because I just finished second to Matt the year before, and I kind of knew where Matt's pace was. And that's when it all clicked. Basically, that, the end of 05, that winter, we got the forks where I could push the bike and I could feel it. But, for most people, they jump on a super bike and they are very difficult to ride. A GP bike is way worse. I mean, way worse than that. But even Tommy Hayden riding the Yost Superbike, there were a lot of times where he just couldn't get the bike to feel like he wanted, and when he would jump on a super sport bike, he could get that feeling right away, and that just the flex and the movement. So yeah, they're not for everybody, and they're definitely not as easy as people think, to ride, for sure. Especially back when they were 16.5 wheels, and it was just different, for sure.
Now, how much different, like your record? Did they break your record at Ohio?
Not yet.
I
still got one record left. That's it.
What do you attribute that to? Because a lot of guys were talking about it, obviously, during the weekend. I think they mentioned it on the broadcast a bunch. But what do you attribute that difference in the Superbike now versus the Superbike then? Is it just a Q tire thing, or?
I don't know, because I don't think we had Qs back then when I set the record that year.
What year was it?
It was 08. I think
I was there watching.
Yeah. So there's kind of pros and cons to look at it. I mean, the bikes have definitely got better. They've definitely got faster. Dunlop, I hear from them that they're not able to use the same stuff and resins in the tire that might not be as good or something. But then you look at everywhere else in the world and all track records are broken. So I just think
you're just saying we're just not as good.
Well, I mean, just need to go. Somehow they need to go faster. But the track was. It's hard to say with the pavements and the years and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, that's the only record that's still there. So I think.
I guess what I'm asking, like bike to bike, like those bikes back then were essentially prototype super bikes,
for
right?
sure.
Like where now everyone's kind of riding at least something you can buy from the manufacturers.
Yeah, and I think they're better, now, but it's hard to say because I haven't been riding them, and I'm actually about to get back on a bike soon. But I'd like to ride a new super bike once I kind of knock some cobwebs off, just to see the differences are. I mean, I kind of know where the GP bikes are now compared to what they were when I was on them, and I really wouldn't have interest in riding one now with having the lowering device now being tall if they come out of the corner, I won't be able, my knees will just lock up. So I really don't have interest in getting on one of those.
I saw a video, I think Martin or somebody, they lower his bike before he gets on it.
Yeah. Oh, they do?
In the garage.
Think
What?
About if your
That's
bike.
so crazy.
Think about like your height if the bike lowered down
I would
4
start
inches.
with my knees on the ground instead of my feet.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, but yeah, no, it's back then they were real factory bikes. I mean, they were one off. They were mean and nasty and fun to ride. I mean, if you had them feeling good and you were riding them good, they were super fun to ride. But they had a window this big.
Yeah.
And I mean, you guys at the time, like that was at the height of the factories in America. I mean, how much were you testing, and what were you testing? Like, I mean, frames. I mean, you start thinking about back then when they were prototypes. I mean, you're talking frames, linkages, stiffness in frames. Like, there's, you said 16.5 wheels, and then I'm pretty sure at that time there's a tire war.
Yeah.
Still going on.
Yeah, a little bit. We were still mainly on Dunlops. But yeah, testing, I mean, you were testing legitimate different forks, different triple clamps. The frames usually were kind of standard. You were just having to run like a stock frame. But swing arms were completely different. I mean, we were testing different wheels, just to see like rigidity. Testing, like I remember I had a 22 millimeter offset and a 24, and I was always bouncing in between both of them and then ride heights to kind of fix the difference. And I actually had Japan make a 23, and they were like, really? I'm like, yeah, because I was like, then I'm not going to change it back and forth. And they made a 23, and that's what I kept in the bike the whole time. So you could kind of get whatever you wanted, done to the bike and make it kind of custom to you and stuff like that.
And speaking on Japan, what was it like working essentially like a MotoGP-esque prototype in Superbike, working with Japan and engineers from Japan? What was that like? Because I remember back in the, I'm pretty sure that they would send a lot of the mechanics over there in the beginning of the year to build the first bikes.
Yeah. They would, and then like when we would go to our first couple tests, we would have, probably 5 to 6 just pure Japanese, engineers from Japan. That were with the bike, and they were going back to work with the test bike in Japan and whatever it was. So you just come in, and I mean, it was crazy. You'd come in from a 5-lap session, and I'd have my five guys sitting there that were my guys, and then behind them there would just be like 5-7 Japanese dudes just with their clipboard, like full on, just download sessions. And I mean, I'd just tell them what everything was doing, and they'd listen to what I'd have to say, and then obviously Matt would do his deal, and then they would go look at data and just compare everything together. And that's what we were really good, I feel, with the Suzuki team was, as a whole team with Japan working really close, because we were, in essence, the ones that were developing that Superbike, even what they were getting in Europe. Like all the main testing stuff was kind of me, Matt, and Aaron and the Suzuki America team.
Now, what do you have any idea what kind of budgets were back then? Like, could you even put a number on what? I mean, it sounds extremely high. Listening to the amount of people there, and I know what we have.
If I look at like what roughly the rider contracts were, and then you look at everything else, I mean, you're probably at. I mean, you had to be. It had to be pretty around the 10 million mark for a budget.
Per year?
Had to be.
Wow.
I mean, because those bikes were a few $100,000 a bike, $300,000 to $350,000 a bike. You're writing off a few of those a year. I mean, between 3 riders, there's probably 4 to 5 that are getting totaled. And then just little crash stuff, travel stuff, just like it normally would be. But yeah, I mean, just like with and not every team, but I just, for a few years, the Suzuki team and rider salaries, it was huge. I mean, I know what they were spending, so they had to be close to 10 million. I mean, I would think.
You think they sold enough bikes to pay for that, or what?
I don't think so. I don't know. They did sell a lot back then. I mean, but it's, they're just, times were different. It's just, you had different sponsors were involved too. And again, the factories, they were just, it was a different time for sure.
What do you think the biggest misconception or misnomer was that people said back then about the Suzuki team? There's always
Whether we had traction control.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Was any of that stuff true, or was there anything that wasn't actually true that you kind of laughed about?
Yeah, I mean, the traction control stuff, you could hear our bikes for sure, and they were cutting and they were making noises, but it was not real traction control. I mean, we had, like, they were retarding mapping, you know, and it was having kills and stuff like that. And it helped. I mean, it was kind of like a rain map in essence, you know, but, you know, everybody would always say, oh, they're winning because of this and they're winning because of TC. And then as soon as they made traction control legal, I think me and Matt won like 48 races between me and him. And then we go to 09 and see what happens in World Superbike. And it's like, are y'all still saying like we got some benefit here? Like it's just, that's work ethic too. And that was a large part of the reason that I think Suzuki had the dominance and they had it before I was there too. I mean, Matt won a lot for sure. But when it was me and Matt there, I mean, the bike was good, there's no doubt. But I think we made it pretty damn perfect. And we were pushing each other too. So, I mean, the level just kind of kept going up within our team, you know, and everybody was just trying to catch up. And again, we had a good baseline bike, but yeah, and then, you know, then I go over in 09 in World Superbike and kind of had the year that happened there. But what also was able to happen was I was riding a different bike. And they were, you know, then everybody said the Yamaha was the best bike. And I was like, if I had my 08 Suzuki in 09, would have been a hell of a lot easier. Would have won a lot more races too. The Yamaha was good, but it wasn't as good as my Suzuki was.
That's crazy.
No way.
That's crazy to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, the front end on it was really good. Like I could literally put the bike anywhere I wanted to, but the rear end of it, the wheeling of it, the torque of it, changing directions of it, because it was a cross-plane crank, left to right. It was like a truck. I mean, it had some weak points, a lot for sure. Yeah.
Now, just going back to, you know, your time with Matt Mladin, were your bikes similar or were they completely far apart? I mean, we see in today's age, like every riders are, you know, not a lot are together. You know,
they were very, I would say they were always kind of 90% geometry suspension wise set up, ergonomically a little bit different because he ran street shift because he had a fused ankle. Bars were a little bit different set up than ours, but ride heights, seat heights and stuff, foot peg position was pretty similar. But then just how suspension rates and compression stuff and linkage and offsets and all that stuff, we usually were pretty close. Yates and Tommy were always a little bit less aggressive of a setup than me and Matt. And then what was crazy though was then when you would look at me and Matt's data, it would, like if you took our 3 best laps and his 3 best laps and you would overlay them, it was like you were looking at your laps. I mean, it started a little bit where he was braking a little bit later than me. I had a little bit more mid-corner speed than him. But then after probably midway through 06, that was when I kind of had his number most of that year. Midway to the end of 06, starting till the end of 08, like when you would look at the data, I'd look at his stuff and I'd go and see him over in hospitality and we'd walk past each other and it's like, hey, did you look at the data? And it's like, there's nothing in it. Like you couldn't find anything. It was just like a teeny bit here or there. And we were riding the bike the same. Sometimes the setup was a little bit different, but how we rode it was damn near identical. So that's when it became difficult just to beat each other. And
obviously, growing up, was Matt already the guy? Like, did you come into that kind of knowing that was who you had to beat?
Yeah, I mean, because I signed, you know, my first real test with a big team was Valvoline in 2000, because I started in 2000, but it was the very end of the season. So early 2000, I got to go to a Laguna Seca test. And I just remember sitting on the wall watching them come out of the last turn. And anybody that would see this, they know what I'm talking about. Those GSXR 750s sounded unreal. Like they were nasty sounding. And Matt coming out of there, he was just the king of just slipping the clutch and just like sounded insane. And like as a rider, like it's kind of like with Casey at certain aspects of his career, it mentally just kind of do your head in. You're like, I've got to beat that dude. Like, holy crap. And I was, 15 watching this. And I just remember, like, from that day being how blown away I was. And then you fast forward to 06, 07, and we're literally battling against each other. So no, he was starting about 2000, he was the man. I mean, he was, and he got beat a couple times, but honestly, and it doesn't always go over well with everybody, but when he got beat, he was on the bike that wasn't matched to the other one. Like when, Nicky, they had some really good battles, him and Nicky, but when Nicky beat him on the RC51, that bike had a pretty big advantage over the 750, because that's before, it was a GSXR 1000, and it was a pretty big advantage. So when I was racing against him, it was the first time that he had been beat on the same motorcycle by his teammate. It never did happen before. So that's when it, started getting stronger like that. But no, he was the man to beat. I mean, from starting kind of 2000 on, I think everybody will admit he was the guy.
Was there a specific moment you can remember where you kind of were like, going back from that point, watching Matt, thinking like, how do I beat this guy to I can beat this guy? Was there like, you remember like a day or a race or a qualifying session where you finally like had that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, in all of testing in 06, I was a little bit quicker than him. But it was funny because even when I joined the team in 03, like he knew what was coming, I guess, and he was already, being Matt to me back then. And I was just like, damn, dude, this guy's aggressive, And then started out in 05, 06 off season, had good pace. And you're just kind of wondering, like, is it going to go to all the tracks? Because right now, when we go to Fontana and we went to Daytona, like, I'm faster than him. For maybe not outright the whole race, but, like, I've got the speed now. And then we went to the race at Daytona. I was quicker than him in the race, just by a little bit, but he strategically, got me there. He checked up out of the chicane. I passed him. He did the draft move and beat me there, but I knew that I had the pace. And then we went to Barber and won one race, heads up. One race, I was right behind him, and he crashed and was able to get both of those. But then we left the weekend, and everybody was like, oh, you still haven't beat him heads up. And it was like, so then we go to Fontana and beat him both races there, and that's when the streak and everything kind of started. And then, yeah, I was like, okay, I've got the speed. But in the same time, I think he was a little caught off guard. I don't think he was his fitness wasn't bad, but it wasn't where I was at. And even if he had that one lap pace, he didn't have the race distance to go. And I knew that, So 06 was a little bit easier of a year. And then I actually broke my hand at the end of the year and still had to win the title. I raced with it broke. And then 07 and 08 was a different story. He came back out, he was trained, he had been doing everything, checking all the boxes. We were doing the same thing about the pre-cooling stuff and diet-wise, we were doing everything. And he had the pace and the stamina, and then it was some battles, for the next couple of years. But yeah, I would say beginning of 06, that's when it all clicked, where I was like, okay, I can do it now.
Yeah, and everyone notoriously talks about like the mental warfare. When did that kind of start? Day one in 03?
Yeah, pretty much it started back then, and then it really started, 06. Like I said, I think it wasn't horrible. There was a couple moments, whatever would happen, but I think he was a little bit, like I said, caught off guard, was a little bit complacent with where he was, and then he was kind of like in the middle of the year, he's like, all right, man, he's like, I can't beat him, I don't. So he had to go look in the mirror, change a lot of stuff, and he did, and he came out in 07, and he was a completely different person. And then I would say that's when, 07, 08, those were the tougher 2 years of where it was just like this. But in the same time, what people didn't see was that when we were like alone in a limo going to an autograph signing, he wasn't always like that. So I knew the game he was playing, and I was always sometimes kind of like, why do we got to go through this shit?
Did you actually have that conversation?
A couple times I was like, why aren't you like this all the time? And he just, that's the way he was, and he did everything he could to get under skin. And to me, it made me try harder. I just wanted to win more, So he needed it to put himself in a place to go to battle with me. And then that helped me kind of overcome some of the stuff I was dealing with him. But in the same time, I knew deep down that he respected me. And I respected him on the track. There was never one time that there was a dirty move. Like, I actually trusted him probably more than anybody, and vice versa. So there was a lot of good stuff with it. And then there was a lot of times too where, you know, even with bike setup, bike development, we would both try a linkage in one day, and then when we were at lunch, you know, I'd walk past his table and he would be like, hey, what'd you feel on that? And I was like, oh, it's better here and not as good there and whatever. He would say the same thing. So we did work together on actually making the bike better, but then we went about it, you know, a little bit differently too.
Was there any kind of trickery going on where you'd you know, say you were trying this or that kind of thing and try to lead them down a different, like what were some of kind of the tactics?
There was a couple, which actually kind of came back to bite me almost a little bit. There, like at Road America, one year in Salt Lake, there was a couple tracks that he always had my number, and there was a couple tracks I had his number. And like at Miller, I always had his number there. And I would go down the start finish line, and I was holding the bike at like 70% throttle because I knew he was going to look at my data. So what I was doing was matching his lap time still, but I was going down the straightaway at 70% throttle. But what I learned was that 70% throttle to 100% throttle, it's only like 3 more miles an hour. It's not as much as you think.
Ooh.
And so like when it would come to qualifying, I was like, I only got a 10th and a half after like doing that, but he still got to see it, you know, and he would make comments. He was like, I see what you're doing. He was like, you know, nobody else did. But yeah, there was some stuff that a couple stories I won't probably bring in, but definitely some trickery type stuff. But in the same time, we, as a team, we worked really good together for sure.
Do you think he was your hardest teammate during the years to race?
Yeah. I mean, he was the hardest person I ever raced. You know,
Ever.
I mean, it's, I mean, I raced against a couple guys with a little bit more talent, you know, not much. Like, we're talking like Casey and Marquez and like Lorenzo type people. But when it comes to a super bike, he's the only person that I ever raced against that when I felt like I was doing everything right and I felt good on the bike, that there were a couple days that he rode away from me. And I know, obviously, I did the same thing to him, but there was, like, when I was in World Superbike, there was never, if I wasn't able to be up in contention to win the race, it was because I was having some sort of an issue with the bike, or the Ducati, like at Imola, for example, the Ducati just works better there because the trellis chassis would flex, and it's just a known thing. I couldn't get my bike to work there. I was fighting 3rd and 4th place. I knew that, you know, but, like, I never got rode away from when I'm like, oh, I'm feeling it, like everything's good. Matt did that a couple times, you know, and that's something that's hard to go back to the motorhome at night, and you're like, you know, guess what? When they say, did the bike work great? I said it worked awesome, and I rode great, and he rode away 2/10 a lap, you know, and I couldn't do anything about it.
Do you have a track, like, do you have a memory or a race that you could pull right now?
Mid-Ohio, 100% was 1 year that it was the year I set the track record and still have it, 23.6. So, and what happened was he started out in the first 6 laps of the race, 7 laps, I ran 23.8, like just 2/10 off of qualifying. And he got out to not as good start, and he was like 1.3 behind me or something, 1.4. And every time we came around the first 6 laps, he was 0.2 faster. And I was like, and again, I did 23.8, stacked them. So my lap timer, I was sitting there, I was like, is my lap timer broke? And I looked back, and he's right there. And I looked back behind him, and I could see we've already got like 6 seconds on third, on like the 5th lap. And I'm like, this dude really is breaking the lap. He's like running lap record pace. And he did like 23.6 and 7 the first 8 laps of a race. And I'm like, the hell is going on? Like, I can't go faster than this, and I'm not riding bad, you know? So that was one example. And then I think he did something similar at Road America. So yeah, those were times where it's kind of like, Jesus.
Did you guys crash? Like, I watching it, I feel like I don't remember you guys crashing a lot.
No, I went in my 4 Superbike seasons, 05, 06, 07, 08, I think I crashed, I think it was 3 times.
Whoa.
So how do you feel like how could you find the limit without crashing?
So, I mean, it's kind of like, riding a dirt track bike, or even when you're sliding around, I feel like the closer you are, and it's difficult. I mean, it's easy to say this, but the closer you are to the edge and the bike is constantly moving, you have the most feel. So just back in those years, by how we had the bike set up, how well we were riding, me and him, you're just, every corner you're going in and the bike's slightly drifting going in, you get to your knee, you can feel you're playing with the rear and the front, kind of going through the middle of the corner, and you can have a lot of feel for it, and I think there's a large part, in that, in being just so close to the edge that you just know where that edge is, and because we didn't have a lot of crashes, for the pace we were riding.
Do you think that Matt Mladin was the perfect guy you needed for going to Europe and going through, your whole European chapter of your life? Do you think that things would have been much different if you didn't have a Matt Mladin to race against and to kind of build you into somewhat of a superhero mentally?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've talked about it before. I mean, I've said it to other people as well, but I think I would have got to the same level I got to, but I think it happened a couple years earlier, racing with him, just because of work ethic and testing and seeing how he went about stuff. Obviously, I had to duplicate that, whatever. And then just the type of racing we had, the rivalry had, on and off the track too. It just made it where, when we went to 2009, everybody was like, well, how are you going to fare and how are you going to learn all this? And you have this guy to race against. And I was like, can't be worse. I was like, it has to be easier. Like, y'all don't understand. So I got to learn a place and all these guys are being nice. That's no sweat, So it was definitely, like I said, there were, I tell people all the time, we were lucky to be able to win a GP race and win the World Superbike title. But out of all the years I had racing, 2003 to 2008, which was a large part of the crew that I had, that we were able to put together and how fun the team had. But even racing Matt, those were the favorite years I had racing. They were some of the more stressful ones, but that was the most fun I had racing.
And to follow that up real quick, were you kind of in your own world in those years, where it was just every day, it was, there was nobody really else in it. It was just you and Matt, really.
Yeah.
So, was it just 3 years, 4 years of just, you were just in that chapter of your life?
Darts at a picture of
No, I mean, that's
just in a punching bag.
That's how it was. I mean, it was honestly, when I look back at it now, having kids and being my age, it was pretty surreal and special that everything could happen like that. I mean, I was 19, 20, 21 to 24. I had my own bus, had my dogs with me, had one of my two best friends who was always traveling with me. And, the way everything was back then, I was able to invest kind of into myself for racing. So it's like when I was back home, I could only think about waking up, training, massage, going to chirotherapy, going to, oxygen therapy, the altitude stuff. That was a normal, if I had 7 days at home, I was training hard 5 days. I would have 1 day of an active recovery day and 1 day off. And then the 4 days during the week, 2 of the days I was getting hour-and-a-half massages. And then 3 days a week I was going to do a cryotherapy session because I was sponsored by them. So I was able to put every piece of effort into just making me better, making my team better, all the stuff that translated into, kind of the wins or whatever happened. It was a big process, but that's what those 4 years were. It was hey, go party 1 night a week, go have fun at the club or whatever it was, and then everything else was work. That was it. So I was able to kind of switch off 1 day a week and have fun, but then everything else was just full on serious.
How much money were you spending on yourself in doing that? Was there a certain budget, or did you just go, whatever it takes to win, I'll spend?
Yeah.
Kind of deal?
Well, no, it's hard to even know what it was back then. You have your the plunge pool thing. That thing costs $10,000 or something. But again, without getting into all the details, that was the best decision I made to spend money on myself with having a physiologist and trainer. I mean, just for instance, I paid a guy, he was 125 grand, a year, but he did everything.
Oh, wow.
He did everything for me, and I'm talking everything. Like it was blood test every month to make sure I wasn't, like if I was getting tired, we would have mini breaks in the year, and he would fly and we would do training camps, at different places in the world, like mountains in Italy, high altitude stuff. And, just he would have everything written down from meals to training and all that kind of stuff. And I just know back in those days, like when it came to training, there was nobody that was doing more.
You were farther ahead than most. You were doing, probably taking stuff from cycling and altitude training. I mean, that's pretty, you don't hear really anybody doing
like
that even now.
All the supplements and just everything that like really, works together. He was able to plan for me. And it's the same as what like an NFL quarterback or you're able to put money into yourself, and it goes a long way. I mean, it does. And even like the mechanics on my team, like I think a lot of people knew back then that I was bonusing those guys besides what the team would do.
Oh, wow.
But it brought us, we were such a good team and so tight that the camaraderie and everything, how we got along, it was awesome. I mean, if you ask my mechanics from back then, that was their favorite, the heyday years. And it wasn't just about the money, but like I was in a position where I could do those things. And it made at the end of those 4 years, I was more successful by spending a little bit more with my mechanics or my physiologist that was able to get me what I got. And some people I don't think they would look at it always like that. They're like, yeah, I'll spend a quarter of that, and but that's the way that's the way it happens to be able to tick all the boxes. I mean.
I get my guys ice cream when I have a good day because that's about what my budget can afford.
No, I mean, and like I said, I say all that, and we were all us riders kind of back then. It was just a different.
Yeah,
no, it's what you could do. It's what you should do.
Well, and I think it's just interesting. A lot of people just don't understand back in the day, with the manufacturers specifically, that it was just a different time period than now, and you can put it in percentages of like what you're able to kind of use to help yourself and whatnot. But
what was like a win bonus back then? If you're allowed to say, I don't know if you're still under contract, NDA.
No, I think it was. I mean, it changed obviously a couple different years, but it ranged from I think 25 to 50K a race win.
It's crazy. I always wonder, like mentally. I mean, even for myself, if that was on the line, like how much more would you be willing to risk it? Like what is that?
A lot.
A lot.
I know it would be, but it's like, how do you, like when you're out there racing, quantify that? Like in my head, when it's like, if I go up a spot, I get $200 more. It's like,
Well, I mean, just real quickly, there was a couple times where, like I broke my hand in a couple places the day before, the race weekend or Friday. We're racing Saturday, Sunday. Go in to get it x-rayed. The doctor, he's like, oh, we're going to cast it. And I said, no, I've got a race tomorrow and the next day, and then I've got 2. He says, you can't do that. And I'm like, you got no clue what's on the line. Like, I mean, I have to. And then, we raced after an appendix got taken out one time. And, those kinds of things happen. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at championship bonuses and stuff like that, you'll do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like me and Matt, we were racing at Laguna one year in 2007, and it came down to whoever won the race won the title. We had raced the whole year, I think 22 races or whatever it was, and you're sitting on 400 points, and it's like whoever wins the race wins the championship. And we were midway through that race. I made one little mistake. He got out to like 0.9, and actually that was the first time at Laguna where he had pretty similar pace to me, and I usually was better than him there. And it was like 12 laps to go. And I just remember probably the only time in my helmet that I ever said this was like, I'm going to either crash or I'm going to win. I'm not finishing second. I mean, that's just, there's no reason, So luckily I started like getting in a rhythm and putting it together and caught him and won the race. But no, I mean, back then, and even now, I mean, there's bonuses too, but like back then when the way it was, you'll take some chances.
Yeah.
Is it like Supercross? Like Supercross bonus style? Like, is it like, are we talking millions?
Yeah, I mean, it was, well, not, I think back in Superbike racing, normally it was $500,000 or something for a Superbike title and,
Yeah.
and like 250 for another one. Same thing in World Superbike. I think it was probably $500,000 to win it. GP's 1 or 2 now, depending. But then you have, like if you're racing 2 championships in a year, which we did a couple seasons, and you're able to, if you win both of those, what happens the next year after? So all contracts are different. But I mean, yeah, when there's some money on the line and that's what you're doing for a profession, it makes it a whole lot easier,
Do you think that pushes the whole sport ahead? Obviously, on the bike side of things, money makes the development go farther, but if riders are willing to sacrifice a little bit more and push a little bit harder when there's that much money on the line, do you think that makes a big difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's just at the end of the day, I think it's like if you're tied in a championship battle and you've got a fractured wrist or a couple broke fingers, and you got to get on the bike tomorrow to finish like a couple fifths, or are you going to sit out when if you win the championship between a manufacturer and a helmet and a leather company and all this stuff, let's say it's an $800,000 day. You're gonna probably suck it up and race with a broken, when you broke your pelvis. If you were on the last weekend and that crash happened on Friday and all you had to do is finish 15th or better on Sunday for $800,000,
yeah.
You're gonna be on the bike,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, but in the same time, do I feel some of those choices nowadays? I mean, yeah, but I'm not gonna change anything for my kids. There's no doubt.
Well, it lets you get up and not have to go to work anymore, right? So,
Yeah.
hypothetically speaking, would you do the same thing and take the same path and do everything you did if the money wasn't there? Like start your career over day one today.
Yeah, I mean, yes, because that's the reason you started it, right? Yeah. So that's where I still kind of get back to the point of when it's not having a good day, it's like, well, I mean, you are making money doing it, and it is your passion. So most people, if they could, for their career job, if they could do what they love to do the most and get paid to do it, they're going to do it. It's just, if the money's more, the risk, sometimes it might go up or some things might change. But I think even, if you're still able to make like a normal living doing it and that's your passion to do it, you're still going to do it. And then if you're a racer, if you're going into the last lap and it's, you're 0.2 behind somebody, I don't think if you're going to take the same risk to pass them if it was for 25 grand. If you're a racer, I think, but.
I mean, you could just look at us. I mean, we're here. We're taking.
But that's right. But I think I would still do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just obviously if there's some things you're gonna go about things differently. But I still think if you're a racer, if you started riding when you were 8 and 12 and doing all the stuff, when you're paying to do it, you're still gonna do it.
Yeah, I just think it. Thinking about it a lot, it's just like your lens gets a lot sharper.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at
mind,
things differently. Yeah, for sure.
I know there's always been rumors and stories about some of the shit that Matt did back then. You don't have to go into detail because I'm sure you won't on certain of it, but was some of the stuff more personal? Did he actually get, outside of on track stuff or just talking shit about your riding or that kind of thing? Was there truly some of those personal attacks or vendettas that went on that people rumored about?
A little bit, but honestly, not even.
I love it.
But not even. It's because it was what it was, And I mean, like, I'm married now, and things are completely different. But back then, I think I was 20 or I was 21, and I was dating some like 30-year-old kind of supermodel girl. And I think he got a bunch of pictures and he put them like around the toilets, like at the track or something. When honestly, like for like maybe a split second, I was like, really? But then, I mean, me and my buddies are laughing about it too, like at the end of the day, because I'm like, what? I'm the 20-year-old that's getting to date the 30-year-old, so it's like, it is what it is. Yeah. I mean, but that kind of stuff, like that wouldn't bug me as bad as I think people thought it did, There's just, it was more just like the little bullshit remarks, like here and there in passing. And then like, even like with Houseworth, like that was a different animal, because they would get into it sometimes. And
people don't know Houseworth was your crew chief.
Yeah. Tom Houseworth was my crew chief. His nickname is House because he's big as a house, and he's can be a mean individual too, if he needs to be. So that probably made even the riff in the team more difficult because Matt's crew chief, my crew chief, and then me and Matt, we were kind of all four. We'd go against each other in some way.
Style.
Yeah, exactly. So it was difficult. But like I said, I mean, if you ask Matt, even the day he retired to now, I mean, he looks at things differently now. Obviously, a lot more. Same thing as me. But I think he'll always admit that, racing me those years and vice versa, that those were our favorite years racing because, he pushed me to another level. I pushed him to be a better rider than he had been in those years before. He had not trained like he did against me. He said he had not ridden as good, in his whole career. So for me to be able to get that out of him and him get that out of me, I mean, there were some fireworks in between, but in the same time, I mean, I think it made for a really good show. And I don't think me and him, because we talk about it now, I don't think we realized back then how, I wouldn't say important the show was, but how entertaining it was. Because now that I'm back in the series and I just see people and fans again, people that, were back there 10, 15 years ago, they're like, oh, that was the biggest part of my life. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know you. So to be that, big in somebody else's life or what me and him did, that does, I appreciate those things now. Where back then it was just work and it was just so no, I get enjoyment for all that stuff and what we went through and put each other, through. We'd never, not want to do it. And that's where, if we talk on the phone now, he's going to be at the next race. It would have been a shame to do all the stuff we did and the good and the bad moments and not be able to have beers, later on in life about it and talk about it too. So
I heard that he's coming to Jersey. I follow him on
He'll
Facebook.
be under our tent. So
No way.
Get him on the podcast.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be crazy.
So Yuasa Batteries, our newest partner, they are more or less the biggest battery supplier for most power sports bikes. But curious, this is a new segment we're trying out. What did you do after all those kind of tough races or tough seasons against Matt, or at any point during your career to kind of recharge your batteries?
Honestly, just, I had a good group of friends, and usually, the day after races, I would because I was always really strict with diet stuff and just training and stuff like that. So, Mondays I would always just try to go eat whatever the hell I want to eat and go, just relax and just be with the friends and try to switch off as much as I could for, 1 or 2 days. But for me, that was, I wouldn't say a weakness, but that was what I was always looking for, the next thing, and what the next goal was. But no, I'd say just being around the close circle of friends I had and just trying to reset, trying to have fun for the weekend, but then, go straight back into the next one.
That's Big Ron was back then. He's part of that.
He wasn't as big Ron back then. He was back there, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That's our Yuasa Battery Recharge your battery tip. Yuasa Battery is setting the standard for power sports batteries since 1979. Each and every day starts with Yuasa Battery. Big Ron, it's funny to watch. You guys, I can just imagine when you were kids the shit you guys got into.
He was, like I said, him and Jeff, between the two, I mean, that's who, when I had my own bus, we were traveling across the United States, me and him, and just
Ronnie's our truck driver on our team.
Yeah.
Ben's high school sweetheart.
Yeah. Team bodyguard too.
Yeah. There he is right there. Dude. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's good.
That's awesome.
He will do anything for anybody if he likes you.
He's a beauty.
Yeah.
Was that GSXR your favorite bike? What was your favorite bike in your career?
Probably it's probably my 2007 or 8 Superbike. Yeah, I mean those were fun to ride. They were difficult to ride, but man, when they worked, they were so good.
So if somebody lines up every bike in your career, Yamaha GP bike, Ducati, whatever it is, you're getting on that.
Probably that or my 09 Yamaha. I mean, I did
Really?
I liked the front end on it, and it was fun to ride. It just didn't work as good as the Suzuki, or definitely not the Ducati I had to race against with Haga. But I liked the ergonomics of it. I liked how I had it set up and just the feel. Like when I jump on my Suzuki now and I sit on it, it feels like like an older bike. It's like, wow. But the Yamaha, it feels more modern, and how I, kind of had the GP bike set up. GP bikes were cool. I just didn't, I've never made, no bones about this. I just didn't like riding those bikes as much. They just didn't have the feel. Really stiff, really rigid, like no weight transfer to them. Super trick motorcycles, but not something that like you can sit there and slide around and move and kind of manipulate and have fun with. So I'd say the Superbikes. The '06 Superbike was real fun because it didn't have TC. So it was like the most analog Superbike of its time. And that was really fun to ride. I mean, you could come out of corners and actually just do whatever you wanted to do on it. So
yeah, you said Matt was feathering. I can't even imagine feathering the clutch. What does that even?
Yeah, I want to know. Did you ever try it? Could you replicate it?
I was never one of the only times I would do it. Like if I came out of the last corner at Laguna, I was more just like on the throttle kind of thing. The only time I would slip clutches would be like Road America coming up the wheelie hill on the start finish, like going to the checkered flag.
So use it as like a wheelie control?
Yeah, because I never like to use a rear brake for wheelie control because I just like talking with engineers and stuff, slowing the motor down and having to reaccelerate like wasn't as good as just like keeping it wound out, but kind of, slipping it to, so that would be the only time I would really use it.
Can't even imagine. Now you don't even touch the clutch.
I was going to say, I couldn't imagine the Harley just slipping it. It wouldn't last. But there was a cycle news, like, I remember it was like a full page or half page of him coming out of Laguna, the last corner, and you see his finger on the clutch and everybody. That's when the whole story kind of was breaking of Matt Mladin slipping the clutch, and you're just like, dude, what? What are you doing?
Oh, yeah, because he came from motocross. So, he was heavy.
Looking for a rut.
Yeah.
But moving into 2009, when did you know your, I guess, chapter with Suzuki was going to be done? And then was it always the goal to go to Europe? And, how did you make that transition? You said, like, you didn't really have a manager at the time. Like, how do you go from being with Suzuki almost your whole life to then, hey, I'm going to a Yamaha team or Yamaha Italia?
There's a couple things. I had ridden the Suzuki Wildcard GP bike in '08 a couple times, and they wanted me to go there, but there was another rider on the team with another manager that was kind of helping block that move a little bit. And so just basically that wasn't really an option, even though like the progression of how things were going, that's kind of how it should have gone. And then so that didn't happen, and then the fighting with Matt in America was kind of getting to a boiling point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to win 3 titles in a row now, and I'm not saying I'm the number one on the team, but y'all got to stop treating him as the number one on the team, basically, because he had a really good relationship with Mel Harris, the president. So I was kind of always a little bit second fiddle to that, and I was just like, I'm not taking it anymore. So I went over to Tom Halverson at Yamaha, and I said, hey, what about riding for y'all next year? And they wanted it to happen.
In America? Or
in America.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then he started talking with McCarty about it, and that translated to going over to Lynn Jarvis and talking, Japan and all that stuff. And then I got a call from Lynn, it was Keith McCarty called me, and he said, hey, we can't have you here. We don't have the money to have you here, and things are going to be changing, just in the racing in the next couple of years in America. So it'd be better for you to go to Europe. And Mel Harris had already told me that at Suzuki. He was like, man, if you don't stay here, he said, you have to go to Europe. And I was like, all right. So then he said, Maio Marigali's going to call you from Yamaha World Superbike. They called me. We talked a little bit. He wanted it to happen. I flew over it was the Monday before Laguna, and I flew over to Milan, landed Monday night, signed the contract, and then flew back to Laguna Seca and raced the last weekend. So really, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, if things, wouldn't have changed as much in America, I would have never went to Europe. I mean, it wasn't something I wanted to do because of traveling, and I already know that I hate flying, so I didn't want to do it, but I always said that I wouldn't let it stop me from racing if I had to do it. So that was never, because I'd kind of had some opportunities to talk with teams, and I knew it was possible for me to go over in World Superbike or GP, but it had to be the right situation. And then just with everything, how things changed, I basically had to go over there and jumped on the World Superbike, and then obviously went over to GP after that.
What, I mean, that must have been like probably the biggest decision of your career at the time, because you don't know how good the bike is really, and you've never seen any of the tracks there. What was that like making that decision? Like, what was the mindset?
That was a huge. That was a decision I made, kind of looking over a 5-year, standpoint, because, when I made the decision, just plain out, it was half the money to go to World Superbike.
What?
From what I was making in America.
Wow.
So I was already taking a pay cut to go over there, and then the bike was different. The team was different. The tires were different. The suspension was different. The electronics everything was completely different. But they let me have Tom Houseworth and bring him. And so we went over there kind of with a blank slate. But everything had been going really well for us. So like confidence was high. Everything was going good. And then testing started out, and race season and all the stuff. We had some, kind of pitfalls in the earlier of the year. That we had to make some kind of changes mid-season, but worked out, and we were able to win that title too.
When did you know that, hey, this bike feels pretty good? Like in testing, like were you always able to go to tracks that you never saw and be, quick and, make the tracks look like animals or whatever?
Yeah.
He knows what I'm talking about.
That was a joke of a deal, but everybody took that so
Talking
serious.
about doing acid or something?
Oh no, dude! I looked at this video last night, and I remember there's a YouTube video of they're asking how he learned the track so quick, and he pretty much, the guy would pull up track maps and you go, oh, that looks like a cat laying on its back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never saw that?
It is the best video of all time.
You're going to have to put this like in the little segment.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not helping your Asperger's case at all.
I know.
And he kept the straightest face ever, dude. It was awesome.
Well, they were like, do the,
whale.
We're going to, the T-Rex that goes roar.
The T-Rex that goes roar.
So they were like, just do this. And I was like, what kind of demeanor do I have to have when I'm doing this? And they're like, well, just be normal, like you're not having fun, just real cold. I'm like, oh, okay, that's easy then. So yeah, we did that. That was a spoof video. But so when I went over there, we had our first test. I jumped on Haga's race bike from 2008. With his settings on it, I didn't even touch it. Like foot peg location, everything. Went out on it, matched his qualifying time in like 10 laps. And then
Where at?
Portimao.
Okay.
And then we jumped on the 2009 bike that had full Superbike electronics on it, had swing arm, had suspension, but it was a bone stock motor, like bone stock. And I ended up and it was a full team's test. I ended up second quickest on it by like a 10th or so. And I remember, sitting on pit wall, everybody's loading up the garage, and I pulled Mayo and Tom out. And I said, guys, I was like, because now that I've kind of seen like the level, that was the first time I was on track with all the riders. I was like, I think we can win the title, this year. But I said, it's going to be, we need everything we can do. And I said, y'all have got to listen to Tom and me on how we want to go about things. But I said, I think it's possible. We're going to have to work our asses off. And then the season started, there was, like I said, some ups and downs, some DNFs with the bike. Bike ran out of gas at Monza. That was one crucial part of the year where they listened to what I asked for after that and made some requests happen. And then we were able to finish the season and win the title. But it was that was a pretty special year. And I think back then, like, I wasn't able to kind of take it all in at that time because there's just so much stuff going on. But when I look back at, what we did and how we did it, with Yamaha being the first, as their first world championship, which I didn't even know that. I didn't know they had never won before that year. which put more pressure on at the end. It was special, definitely. It was a good year.
What was it like going from America, where there was like some fans, it was pretty good, but you were kind of secluded, then going to Europe where it was just like free for all, no security? I mean, at that time it was just storm the track before the race is over kind of shit.
Yeah, I mean, I struggled with that a little bit more than probably most people think, just because I don't, if there's like a left and a right, and right people are, all your fans, and left people, you can walk behind the 18-wheelers to go to your deal. That was me, and it wasn't because I didn't like the fans, and I respected having fans and all that stuff, but I don't like any attention on me. Like, I want to go do my deal and get through it. And, it was kind of cool at first, but then, I always tell people that, going over there, you're more or less famous at that level, in those years. And then when I came back to America, I'm back in my home country and nobody knows who I am, which I actually liked, I was happy with. So, I mean, like I said, there were some positives to it. I love how all the fans were in Italy and Spain. I mean, it was super cool and way different, than what it is here. But yeah, having all the attention and stuff like that, it's not always stuff I wanted, but it's, you got to deal with it, and it goes with it too.
Did you ever have any like crazy run-ins with fans or anything? Any horror stories?
I had I had 2 stalkers that,
Whoa.
Really?
yeah, it got pretty gnarly, a little bit. And then one story that was actually pretty funny was I was good friends with a lot of pro cyclists because they lived in Lugano and Como, and we were sitting at the last. This is just a funny story. So we're sitting in my motorhome, and I had Oscar Freire and Tom Bonin in there, and they're world champ bicycle people, like huge.
Yeah, Tom, I know Tom.
Yeah. And Oscar Freire is a 3-time world champ. And we're at Valencia, and it's the last race of the year. So it's a bit of a party there. Everybody, we just done the last race. Everybody's kind of starting to drink and have fun. And the test was Tuesday, Wednesday. And I'm in the shower in my motorhome, and all of a sudden, I hear the thing shaking a little bit, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? And all of a sudden the shower door opens, and it was 2 like girl fans. And they just looked at me, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then they just rolled out. They just were laughing and just started screaming and ran out. And I finished my shower and jump out, and I was like, Tom, what? I was like, y'all didn't even stop him? And he was like, we picked the wrong profession, And I was like, just so you know, that's never happened before. I was like, that is pretty great that it happened with y'all here. But stuff, I mean, there were some pretty, it gets like that at some times. I mean, for sure. Not all the time, but I mean, there were some funny moments and stuff like that happens. Yeah.
Were you traveling around like private, or you having to fly commercial everywhere all those years in Europe?
Yeah, pretty much commercial. I mean, I flew private probably 6 or 7 times because like there would be a track in Spain, Aragon, that's like 3.5 hours from Barcelona or 3.5 from Madrid. So it was easy just to direct flight into that. But it wasn't too posh, but yeah. I mean, we got to the international flights, like all those, we got to fly, first or business. Yeah. So it was nice. But
so when you're like in the airport in Spain or Italy, is there people like stopping you walking to the airport kind of deal? It's like that level of
Europe's wild, man. They love it.
I would say it's kind of, if you're at a typical Spanish Italian restaurant and you're like top 5 in World Superbike or top 5 in MotoGP, 80% of the people, by the time you're 10 minutes in there, they kind of know you're there. And again, they're super respectful. They're not all just like jumping on you, but the typical 75-year-old woman, like she watches motorcycle racing, so I mean she knows. So it's pretty cool.
Is that like an uncomfortable feeling?
Yeah, I mean,
walking in places and
for me, I didn't love it, but that's but it's like I said, it's part of it. But I think that's some of the perception about me that probably people don't understand. Even back in AMA days, when I was kind of always like tunnel vision. I just, anytime where there's like more attention on me, like I don't dig it. I'm an introvert. So
that is interesting.
That started as a kid, like were you introverted in school and stuff?
Yeah, like if I was a kid that had to speak in front of the class, like on the overhead projector stuff, like my voice would be shaking.
Yeah.
Like I'm just an introvert, quiet. I just don't like attention.
That is insane because like, I think I told you a story. Did I tell you a story? Well, at Laguna, I was there as a kid, and I had your poster on my wall. Right, I was like, you went up through the Superbike to then World Superbike. I was like, that's a path that I'd like to take, and so that was always something I inspired to. But at Laguna, just hearing you talk about how locked in you were and how you didn't really love it. I remember the big change for me was when I tried to get an autograph or whatever, and you were just like gone, and I'm like that dude's a dick. Like I fucking ripped the poster off the wall, and I'm like, screw that guy. But hearing it,
fan now.
Exactly.
I'm like, this guy. No, but it's interesting to hear now, being able to talk about it, your mindset, and I couldn't even imagine. I'm a kid, then, so I don't know that you're locked in with Matt Mladin, and that's all you cared about. So it's interesting.
That was my weakness in racing. I wasn't able to. Like I said, and I wouldn't say enjoy it. Like I enjoyed it with my friends. There's no doubt, but I couldn't be the Nicky Hayden or the Valentino Rossi. And I'm not saying they're doing it for other reasons. Because that's how an extrovert is. I'm married to an Italian woman that's an extrovert, and I'm kind of like, just because you like to do all this stuff, and that's cool. But just because I don't like to do it, that doesn't mean something's wrong with me. It's just you don't understand that, which so which a lot of extroverts, they don't understand introverts, and
me.
Well, but that's again that would be my downfall with racing. That could have made things better, is if I enjoyed being more open with people and stuff like that, and that's just how I am. It's nothing anybody else did wrong, but. Also the problem I had when I could see people that they didn't understand that, and they kind of looked at it like, oh, he's just a dick, or he's just arrogant, or he's about himself. It's like, no, it's not. But you just put another chip on my shoulder because you just don't understand me.
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
I think this podcast has really helped. A lot of people understand that everybody lives in their own world, and they expect what they know, right?
Yeah.
So this podcast has really helped me understand and learn more, right, on that perspective of, maybe because I'm up and down and I, show my emotion or on my sleeve that other people don't. Like Corey is a much different person than I am, and so it's interesting, and I'm glad you're able to talk about it.
Well, I mean, again, if I could go back and I could be that kind of open, bright person, I would do it. But in the same time, and you asked me earlier, if you went back and did it, I think I could be better, but I still think that's just the way I am. When it comes to competitive and winning and all the stuff, I'm going to wipe everything out that doesn't help me win, because that's the only way that I can get into what I need to do to be able to be successful in something.
Did you do anything or have to do anything to kind of work on that? Did Yamaha send you to press classes
Suzuki,
and that kind of stuff?
Suzuki did, the first 8 years I was there, twice a year we would have to do stuff. And with media training stuff, I think I always kind of understood but it was more just dealing with the big crowds of people and just, like I said, just walking through the paddock over to the truck. The whole time I'm thinking about what am I doing in qualifying, or what are we doing with this and whatever. And then you've got people that they want your attention and stuff, and you're trying, I'm trying my best to it, but it's all I'm worried about is this, just some people are able to deal with things better than others. And, with racing, I wasn't able to have that section open, for people, but that's the way it was.
Yeah. And is that kind of what connected you guys? Like Casey, obviously Casey's been pretty open in his book, whatnot, right, about how introverted he is.
Yeah.
Did you guys kind of connect over that in itself, or?
Yeah, because again, if you would sit down with me and Casey at dinner, or just even now how we are, I'm not the same person as I was when I was racing, not at all. And, a lot of people, I think that's, if they ask my buddy Ronnie, they're like, oh, he seems standoffish or this or that. And it's like, yeah, but if you actually go hang out with him, away from stuff, it's a completely different person. So it's just, if I don't know somebody, I'm just not comfortable, and that's how I've always been.
Who are some of your obviously you still close friends with Casey? Who were some of your friends while you were actually racing over there? When you went to World Superbike, were you able to kind of connect with anybody and make that time a little bit easier?
Yeah, Johnny Ray, me and him were pretty good. Chaz was kind of in and out over there a little bit. I was good friends with Hago. Like me and him, for how hard we raced, we hung out. We would go Sunday night to dinner together with his family. Andrew Pitt, like I said, Sebastian Chapontier, they were huge. And then honestly, yeah, I mean, all the riders I got along really good with.
Did they treat you pretty normal as an American going over there? Like, I know sometimes you hear like that sentiment that, you know, the Europeans kind of look at Americans like kind of down on us or something kind of thing. Is that a reality over there?
I didn't see it as much. No. No, I think, and again, the teams that I was on, they kind of respected that I was a little bit more closed off a little bit than most. But no, I never really got that vibe from anybody over there. I thought it was always.
I also
pretty good.
think like you were fast, quick. It's pretty hard to like.
Everyone respected you.
Yeah, like it's pretty hard. If you're not doing what you're supposed to do, I guess it's a little bit easier. But
Yeah.
What point did the injuries start to rack up? Because I know that was kind of really what led to, ultimately you having to call it a day, right?
Yeah.
Was injury. So when did you come over there with like some lingering stuff?
Yeah.
Or?
So a lot of people don't realize my shoulder stuff started, back in 2004.
oh, what?
Yeah. So I mean, because I've separated this right shoulder, I've had because grade 1, 2, and 3 is when you just like pop and stretch ligaments, but sometimes they're still together. Grade 5 is when they're completely gone. So I've had 2 grade 3s and 2 grade 5s just to this shoulder. So it's been blown out 5 times. So like my first one was in 05. I had like a mild one, and then that was the beginning of 05. And then the beginning of 06, 2 weeks before the season started, I did a grade 3, where that's the one where it looks like it's dislocated, but you can still move it. So I raced that whole season with it like that, won that championship, fixed it again after that one, and then I had another surgery at the end of 08 going 09, so I've already had 3 surgeries on my shoulder, and then I separated it. A lot of people didn't realize it, but in the first weekend of 2012 at Qatar, I separated it there, raced the whole 2012 season like that, and then I blew it completely out at the end of 2012 at Sepang. And that was the big one where they had to put cadaver tendons inside and cut my shoulder blade and cut the collarbone, shorten everything, and it was a big surgery. That was the one where I think if I would have rehabbed like more like close to a year, things could have got a lot better. But I rushed back real quick, and I was back on the bike in like 3.5 months when I should never have been on the bike. So yeah, it's just like I said, this shoulder's just, it started way earlier than just like the year I retired. I mean, that was the 5th surgery I'd had on it by then, and now it's still like it'll just pop
And
in
when
and
they
out.
did surgery before the cadavers and stuff, did they lock it in?
Yeah.
Because that's what I've done.
And
right?
then I blew it back out.
And mine's like
Yeah.
I don't have barely any movement, and I know exactly what you mean by rehab. I did 3 months heavy, and then went back to Europe, and I was great here, but I really fucked myself for getting above my shoulder and stuff like that, and it's definitely.
And muscle-wise and strength-wise, like I'm actually not bad now. It's gotten back, but what I've tried to, the best way to explain is like if that's your shoulder joint, and this is the capsule, that's kind of the, how it fills in. With all the injuries I've had, mine's like that. It's gotten a lot smaller, so the small ligaments that are inside the joint, mine has a lot of play and move. So after like 2 laps, even though you've got actual like physical strength there, you don't have much strength in your joint, and it just kind of floats and it gets tired, and it's a weird type of pain and feeling. But yeah, it was just like I said, we had a lot of shoulder stuff happening at the very end, and yeah, that was it.
So do you think that was some of the hardest things? If you didn't have it, do you think your GP career would have been different? Like, do you think you could have been?
No, I was leaving. I was going to go back to World Superbike. So that's what, again, most people don't realize, that the contract that I signed was 2013 to ride the factory Ducati Pramac bike. And then 2014, I was going to be in World Superbike with Chaz as my teammate. So that was the plan, and I wanted to go race another 2 or 3 seasons in World Superbike and then retire. So I just, like I said, the GP stuff, like I would never take it back. I'm glad we did it. But in the same time, like I was able to learn that my style and the way that I rode the bike, it wasn't the way that GP bikes needed to be ridden. And I was trying to evolve, and so was Nick too. I mean, because he kind of fought the same thing, but it's just, they're just different ways to ride. And my strengths of riding was kind of like how Top Rack is now. Top Rack even more so of what I did, but he rides like that. And those GP bikes, the way that you ride them, you can't ride them like that. They don't work, you know. So the way the chassis are, you want to be off the brake earlier instead of like trail braking later into the turn and stuff like that. So I just struggled with that, and I was never able to ride them the way that they were designed to be ridden the best. And that was up to me. It was, like I said, at the end of the day, it was my fault. It wasn't something that I was blaming somebody else for. I just wasn't able to get it, and I could understand that. And that's why I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go back and finish out on Superbikes.
So could you understand, like when you looked at data, what you needed to do, but you just couldn't do it?
Yeah.
And the tires, right? Like you were at Bridgestone, right? Mm-hmm. And they said those tires were absolutely incredible. Even to the Michelins now, they say the Bridgestones, especially the front tire, was absolutely crazy. Like I remember, Bradley Smith, talking with him about the front brake pressure and just how much you could,
Oh, crazy.
Like it's insane.
I remember, I would have trail braking into a turn, I would have my knee just starting to touch the ground and the rear tire still coming off the ground. It's insane. It's like if this thing goes and high sides me off the front, I'm going to land in Mark. It's insane. So that was just a struggle I had, because I came more from, flat track and AMA Superbike, where you rotate the bike in the middle of the corner, you break it all the way into the apex, where a GP bike, the way that you build grip in the tires through the sidewall is that the best way to describe it for like non-motorcycle people and motorcycle people is that like a motocross bike, like if you're going into a rut and it's one of those nice ruts that you can just drag the bar in, you let off the brake and you let the thing just roll. And the same thing, like if you're not a motorcycle person, it's like imagine a bobsled track where you have a banked wall. That's the same thing with a GP bike compared to a super bike, is when you get to the turn, like right when you're about to let everything go, you let it go and you just trust it, and you just kind of pretend that it's up, your tires are up against something, and that's how the grip on GP chassis and tires work, where it's through the lateral side of it. You can't like just break it down in there and kind of stop the bike and rotate it out, because once you get them sliding, it's hard to get them back in line. And so keeping them together is the most important thing. But coming from like super sport, super bike background, the way you ride those, that's not the most efficient way. And that's why I say with Top Rack, it's not because he's not talented. And again, he wouldn't suck on a GP bike, but the way that he rides a bike, he would have to change his biggest strength to try to evolve into a GP, rider. And it's tough. It's really tough to do.
Do you watch him with a little bit of like sympathy almost for where he's at in his career, like for how good he is and whatnot, kind of relative to you in terms of just spending most of your time on super bikes?
Yeah, but there's a couple ways to look at it too. Because I've kind of chatted with him and Johnny Ray lightly on it, like in the past few years, and Johnny Ray had a chance to go to MotoGP too, and it's not just based on because of me going over there and like how I feel about it. It's more just knowing how those bikes are and understanding the level of the riders and everything else. Where, yeah, Johnny Ray could have went over there, and I feel like he could have got a few podiums for sure, maybe a race win or two. I don't think he could have fought for the title over there. But what could have happened most likely is that, you're just like when you look at Cal Crutchlow. You're usually running between 4th and 9th place or whatever. And after 3 years, you got Acosta, Aldegay, Alonso. They're going to come up and you're going to get kicked out. Or you can stay in World Superbike, that you're riding those bikes the way they're meant to be, and you can build a legacy and win 3 to 5 titles. I think that's the best route for people once you get to someone like Johnny Ray and Top Rack that are winning, and they're riding a superbike to the perfection at 25, 26, 27. Once you're in that age up, I think that's the best route to stay in because you don't have the time to change the style to GP and go through, and they don't give you the time.
Yeah.
You don't
That's the biggest
you don't
thing.
have 2 years to figure it out.
Yeah.
You got half a season. And if you don't figure it out, they're pretty already much making the decision. So it's just like I've said, Toprak, he's got the talent. Like Bagnaia is not more talented than him. I mean, Toprak might be the most talented dude on 2 wheels in the world. I mean, he's unreal, but it doesn't always translate to just winning. Just like if you put Verstappen in Kyle Larson's NASCAR at Talladega, where is he going to win it the first year? No. I mean, is Larson going to win in his car the first year in Formula One? No. It has nothing to do with talent. It's literally how you drive the platforms. And motorcycling, MotoGP and Superbike have gotten so extremely apart that that's the best analogy. They're different ways of riding the bike. And it's not so much about talent because, a Toprak and a Martin and a Bagnaia, if you go give them 5 different street bikes to ride, like a super sport bike, a twins bike, a GP bike, a Moto2 bike, I'm betting Toprak probably is the fastest. But if you just ride a GP bike, he's going to have a whole lot of time, and he's got to make changes.
And it's interesting always. I mean, the only thing we can ever see is that Ducati Revs or Ducati World Week, where they are allowed to ride. I mean, I don't know what bikes they are on, but they're allowed to ride stockish motorcycles.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think as well, though, do you think that the confidence, though, coming from GP and going essentially down
it's
is
easier.
much easier because you have that, like, I am the best in the world?
That's been my argument, too, when we talk about, like, talent cup bikes and Moto3 and Moto2 instead of, like twins bikes and stuff like that. Like, if you're teaching somebody the higher level from grade school, elementary school, and then instead of going from like a twins bike to a 600, they're going from like a Moto2 bike to a 600. Everything's easier because the bike doesn't handle as well. You have more feeling to it. So, but what I will say is, like, if you put Bagnaia on a World Superbike, can he go win the races and be up front 100%? Is he going to walk away from them though? No. Like, if he's going to beat Toprak, it's going to be by that much. If Toprak goes over to GP, it's going to be a much bigger gap. So you can take the top MotoGP guys, they can jump on superbikes and they're going to be competitive, but are they going to ride away from the guys? No.
Yeah.
What do you think, about the whole Marquez Pecco deal, obviously coming from an environment where you've had to, your teammate's your worst enemy?
Yeah.
Do you see that kind of going that route over there with that whole deal?
I think Pecco's got a good mindset about it. He is right where, he wants to beat the best on the best bikes. So it's hard to argue the decision Ducati made. I feel bad for Martin because did he deserve it? Yes. But it's just like, it's Marquez. It's just like when Valentino came back to Yamaha. Like, even if I was, doing better than I was back in like 2012, if he wanted to come back to Yamaha, unless I won the title, I'm out, and that's just the way it is. I mean, there's too much power, there's too much sales, or same thing with Marquez, there's just too much. I mean, if Marquez retires on a factory Ducati, they're set. Both of them are set. That's just the best way to do it. So I think it's a good decision. I think there will be a little bit of, feathers getting ruffled some, but I think they'll be able to work together good, and it'll put Marquez on the best bike again. Because right now, I mean, if you see what he's done on the 23 bike, the 23 and the 24 bike are the biggest differences that Ducati's had in all their bike. Like the 23 to 22, there wasn't a huge change. 22 to 21, you could still win on the 21. The 23 to 24, when you have you see what Martin and Pecco said at the first test, and then you read stuff what Domenicali says. That bike is a good 3.5 tenths a lap quicker. It handles better, it works better. You can just see it. So he's done what it takes to be able to get on it, and I think he can win on a 24 or a 25 to 25 with Pecco. So it's going to be interesting. And Pecco, as being a competitor, I mean, he wants to race against the best, and I think some of the little mind games that Mark plays, as in following him in qualifying, I don't think he'll be doing it as much though on the better bike. I think he's what people don't get is when he literally is looking for speed or needing it, he's not afraid to ask for it either. And he's like, hey, I'm not, you know.
But he used to not do that, right? It wasn't.
Yeah,
it was
but-
only in recent time
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
Honda
but-
sucked, and then
Look at him at Aragon. I didn't see him follow somebody once when he had time back
No,
in the
I mean,
pocket.
if he's
and at
got the
Misano,
pace, he doesn't do it.
and
But he's a racer.
Of course.
And that's what I've told people, like, hey, you might not like some of the stuff he does, but you got to remember, these guys are getting paid this much money. He's went through the injuries he's went through, and he also has the mindset that you probably just don't understand, and he wants to win. All he's doing, I mean, there's a line on left to right on keeping it in between the lines on what's legal.
Yeah.
And he's going to go to each line,
Yeah.
but he's kept it inside it. And, you know, as a racer, you know, when I've like talked to Kayla about it and talked to other people, like when you see somebody following somebody in qualifying and the other person spins out and gets pissed off about it, like Pecco, it happened to him last year a couple times with Marquez. And it's like the mindset should be where if you come out of the last turn and somebody's right there and they're wanting to, you know, dog you the whole lap, it's like, okay, well, I'm either going to look back in a lap from now and you're going to be on the ground because you couldn't do what I just did, or I just put a half second on you and I'm going to look back and look at you and see the gap that I put on you. That should be like the racer mentality. It shouldn't be like, oh, the guy's going to, you know, he's following me, he's going to learn something for this one lap and I'm going to ruin my next 2 laps and screw myself out of qualifying. No, you've got to flip the switch on and be like, I'm going to show you, or not let it affect you. And the riders that do that, they go the furthest. Pecco's gotten better this year about it, but that's the kind of mindset you've got to have. And I think, at least for next year with them being teammates, I don't think Mark's going to be doing, you know, what he's been doing because he's also going to have the same bike.
I also think, though, personally, Mark is in a different stage of his life. Before he came into, you know, racing Rossi, I
Yeah.
mean, he's gone through a couple, you know, different riders, you know, besides like the GOAT. And I mean, he's got a girlfriend that he's pretty serious with. I mean,
Yeah.
his life has totally changed. He's gone through injuries and this, that, and the other. He's not the same kid that's just like,
Yeah.
you know, you can see he's like finding the love for racing again.
Yeah.
And I think that he's probably a lot more mature now, you know, going through what he's gone through. And I personally believe it's going to be a little different.
Oh, yeah. No, and I think next year will be, he's going to have as good a shot to win the title next year as anybody. And I think even it's just tough because, you know, I'm not making the excuse for him that he's not dominating this year because he doesn't have a 24. But I am saying for sure if he had a 24, it would be closer. It definitely would be closer. So
mathematically he's still in it.
and mathematically, he's still in it to win the title.
And these
too.
guys are like throwing him like
there's-
GP is insane about how hard they push on the limit to where you would be like, dude, you just don't crash. And like, it's so hard. I mean, racers, we all understand like to a certain level, you more because you've ridden a GP bike. But it's so hard when you see the crashes late in the race and you're like,
Oh, no.
like how? And then, but I mean, they're just on the fucking limit, man.
Oh yeah, no, they are. I mean, it's going to be interesting because they still have a lot of races left.
It's like eight rounds, right?
Yeah, so there's
And
plenty.
just-
I mean, he's
dude, you
back
just see-
55 points. I mean, he could still do it.
They
you
just
know?
do this.
I know.
Like it's
Who
crazy.
are you going for?
I mean, you know, I'm a fan of Pecco and Marquez both a little bit more than Martin. I like him, but it's Pecco again. If he wins it, with the holes that he puts himself in sometimes, you know, and throwing away a couple races at a time, he does it every year.
Yeah.
It seems like he throws 2 away that are like,
Yeah.
really, you know. But he's obviously going to be strong, and again, if Marquez keeps what he's got going, he's got a shot to win it. But the problem is he is handicapped a little bit. It's not huge, but that bike is not as good as those 24s. Because if you look at what the guys like even Bezzecchi was doing last year,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
not even close.
Yeah.
But nobody is on the 23, only Marquez.
Yeah.
So on paper, if he's on a 24, I'm not saying he's running away at every race, but every race that he's lacked that little bit, he wouldn't have lacked that. So I feel like he's riding the same level as Martin and Pecco.
I think Alex has been pretty impressive too. I feel bad for him.
Yeah.
because
He's always got to be in Mark's shadow.
But I mean, otherwise every weekend he's been.
Yeah.
yeah, no, he's been riding.
one of the top 23 guys.
He's been riding good. Then they had that clash last.
Yeah.
Him and Pecco, which I mean, it was a little bit of both of them, I
Yeah.
think, but it was a racing deal.
Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, older sister.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do people realize that? You think people think you're an only sibling just because you're...
I thought that.
Maybe, I don't know. She came to a lot of races back
Oh,
in the
really?
AMA. Yeah. So I mean, the older crowd obviously knows, but yeah, they might think that. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, she's 4 years older. She lives in Florida. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Florida, where at?
Santa Rosa.
She
Oh,
need
okay.
a real estate agent?
Stop, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Stop, dude. Dude.
Got a guy.
They're just closing deals, baby. Escrow.
How hard was it to make the decision to kind of call it a day? Like, were you done at that point? Were you burnt out and kind of?
I mean, I was in the same time. Like I tell people, the shoulder injury, it did kind of come at a point where I was pretty cooked. You know, I mean, I was just, again, I'll never make secret about it. I hated traveling as much as there was at that time, and then, you know, I'd had so many shoulder injuries happening at the same time, and then also a lot of people don't realize too, because I never talked about it, but I got diagnosed with Graves' disease in 2009. So I've had a thyroid, like, autoimmune, you know, disorder for all those years I was living in Europe. And the first thing that affects, that people obviously know, is you don't sleep. So it was hard for me to rest and recover from all those flights that we were doing. And after, you know, 4 years of traveling the whole world and all that kind of stuff, and then what was going on with my shoulder, and then knowing where I was at Indy when I hurt my other shoulder, you know, basically my right shoulder was still messed up. I mean, it was not even close to being, I would say it was halfway through that season, it was probably 60%, 70%, if that. And it needed more time because of all the trauma it had been through. So when everything happened all at once, it was pretty easy to say, yeah, I'm done.
Just to follow it up, I want to read a quote that you had. I know there's more to life than racing, and I've got no regrets. I gave it everything I had.
Yeah.
Do you still stand by that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing, like in racing, like all the decisions, like with the teams I signed for, you know, all the stuff I did, like I said, it would have been nice to have another 2 or 3 years left, you know, and not have the injury and finish in the World Superbike. But, you know, with all the good that, you know, racing gave me and the experiences and all that stuff, it's like, you can't be bitter about it. I mean, I was upset for a couple years when I retired just because it didn't, you know, you're hurt, because I was still, like, even when I retired, I was still messed up from stuff and all that. So you want to feel bad for yourself a little bit, but then, you know, after about 3 years, you're kind of like, I mean, what am I complaining about? You know, you had so much good luck and so much good things happen. You know, it's just part of it. Can't complain.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to go, like, any mental coaching or anything like that before or afterwards?
No. No, that was the one thing with racing when you stopped, that, you know, clearly you start understanding what some people go through, because you know, I was talking to a buddy of mine who's like one of the top neurosurgeons in the country, and, you know, what we do when we're racing, you find out quickly when you retire that it's not normal, you know. And I'm not saying that we're special by any means, but it's when you're used to something and you spend a couple decades, you know, 150 miles an hour, you're sliding through corners, you're on the edge, you know, because I mean, at the level that all of us are, you know, you're literally going through corners of things drifting, you're sliding 150, things are happening. You come in and the guy's like, "Oh, saw that, was everything okay?" And you're like, "I didn't even feel it." Like, everything is so natural at that point, and the adrenaline is so high, your dopamine is so high, everything's just happening. When you retire and the lights go out, you know, it's kind of like I'm not the most normal cat, you know, and you go through that stage, and luckily I have kids and had a good wife and all that kind of stuff, but you can see how quickly people can go out the wrong way, you know, because you're used to something that you're just not even getting 5% of it, you know. You never get that feeling again, really. So it's, you know, I can understand, like, when it comes to like the Navy SEAL stuff, fighter pilots, like people in extreme sports, you're living at a level where your brain's doing stuff every day that's normal for you and normal for your instincts and your talent and stuff like that. But over time, like, it changes, it just affects people differently. So when you retire, you just understand it's like, damn, I need to do a little like woo-saw and like try to figure out how to get myself more normal.
So you said that you haven't even found 5%. Is that really there's nothing else that you have done post-race career that has even itched?
I mean, I get to mess around with the car stuff a little bit, and that gives you a little bit. But I mean, the feeling of, being on the Mugello starting grid with a couple 100,000 fans out there, and that, like, right before you're going out to do battle kind of thing. Like, I get it now a little bit, like with the racers and the team now, which back then it was just adrenaline for me. I wasn't really nervous. Now I get nervous for the riders, because I can't help them with anything and I can't do anything. But I'm going out on the grid, and I hold PJ's umbrella sometimes. I talk with them, and like the build up to that part, like, I miss that. Yeah, there's no doubt. But I mean, in the same time, as soon as it's dry and it starts to like sprinkle, that's when I tell these, like, I'm not missing it right now.
Mid-Ohio stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like, those are the days you don't miss it. But no, it's but in the same time, it's all good.
You did a couple things outside. You owned a couple restaurants, and you had a couple investments as far as that. I mean, one was a barbecue. I think you had a sushi place.
Sushi place and a burger place.
A burger place, okay.
Burger place burned down last year.
Oh, okay. Did you reopen it?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you still own the sushi place?
Sushi place, no, we sold that probably like 6 years ago.
How do you get into restaurant? Probably they say worst industry to get in if you're not a part of it.
It's not easy.
So did you know somebody? Why?
So the sushi restaurant that I was a part of, there was like 4 of them or 5 of them. Like Aspen, Austin, there was one in Hawaii, one in Dallas. And that was just an easy deal. I was just a silent, give them some money and kind of deal. Didn't really have to do anything. The burger thing I was more involved with, but still running day-to-day stuff. We had a manager and all that stuff. So I wasn't really having to do much with it. But the thing I did learn about the restaurant, both were successful, but not crazy successful. I mean, didn't make a huge difference. But like restaurant stuff, if you're wanting to make money in restaurant business, you really have to own, you got to have like 3 or 4 of them. Like one of them, it's not going to make enough money to make a huge difference. I mean, they can be successful, but now restaurant's not easy. I mean, I liked it, but in the same time, would I mess with it again? It'd have to be the right opportunity and all that kind of stuff, but it's difficult for sure.
Do you find it hard to do things in general in life, at a mediocre level, like when I feel like when you come from when you come from racing, I mean, I deal with it with everything. It's just like and I knowing Richie and understanding him as I get older, you kind of see how racing more or less fucked him up enough to the point where now he just treats everything like racing. With that intensity. Which do you feel like that's hard, like going into business in the restaurant or having a cycling team, like to one not get so deep involved in it to try to make it the best that it could possibly be.
Don't you want to be winners?
Well, I mean, it's just like you've got expectations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem with almost anything. I mean, it is, but in the same time, the biggest thing that helped me with that was having 2 kids. Kind of it's like because you're forced to slow everything down and relax and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, just anything, the OCD part that I had from racing, whether it's building a house or working on my land or just anything. I mean, I'm always going to be more on the extreme side.
I think that's hard. I mean, in real estate, I'd see it, a lot, and it's the hard thing for me is like understanding. I don't even want to say like a mediocre person, but just somebody that doesn't understand. Like we live in like I guess a 1% world. Or you're looking finite everything. And you go to like whatever 10%, and you're like you don't see that? Like you can't do that? Like are you kidding me? And you just
why don't you answer that email like now?
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
No, it's difficult. Yeah, I mean, it's not just working in different avenues of life when you just kind of see people that just do stuff half-ass. and it just bugs me,
Dude.
But it's, because it's one of those things now where I'm in a lucky situation with family and racing where I can kind of, live semi-retired and just be mellow and do the stuff I want to do. But as soon as you get into something where you're expecting something or you're building something or it's a new business, then all that old school, stuff, the way you look at stuff comes out and you just want it to be perfect,
Do you try to, put that in a box and not allow that to come out? Mike Tyson talks about like stuff like that, like putting it in a box. And, the way you talk about it is if you found the right opportunity and you were going, like, would you want the old Ben to come back out? And would that take too much of the pie away from what you have now that's so nice with your family and everything?
No, I mean, in certain aspects, you need it. And that's where, luckily, my wife, she's very kind of similar to me. So when it comes to parenting and stuff, like we're all good with that on the same level. But yeah, no, it just depends what it is, like if the girls are kind of getting into something and like gymnastics or doing this and they're wanting help with it, then it's kind of like, okay, well, so
That's what I can't imagine about having kids. Is like, how do you get into like baseball and not like go at it like you're getting a fucking pitching coach, you're getting a batting coach, you're getting.
But see, that's what I think with our kids. What we're good about is we're not like I'm not pushing them into every sport. Like every kid plays soccer. It seems like almost every kid, and half the kids hate soccer.
Yeah.
Like they just,
I know. Excuse to get the energy out. You just make them run around.
So I mean, we do. We've got the girl stuff going on, like the gymnastics and dance and stuff like that, and then they do some horse riding. But like with sports, like if they want to play sports, that's fine. But I want them to be like, hey, I want to go play volleyball, or I want to go do that. And then if they want to, then we start doing it, and they have a different mindset about it. Like they want to do more stuff with it where it's not just you're making them do it. Like I'm not going to make my kids just go play 6 different sports because it's like better for their social skills. They're going to do other stuff or whatever it is. And then when they tell me that's what they want to do, it's like, all right. And then we press after it and we do it the right way and, have fun with it. But yeah, the right way for me is probably always going to be like, let's go check every box, which is fine. But I want, like I said, and I'm sure they're fine with that if that's what they want to do. So, but I think so many parents, they'll kind of push them into something and then they start doing all that when the kid really doesn't even want to do it, so.
Did you have any big passions? I know you're big into cycling, but that was probably proxy just because you were training so much, right? Did you have time for any other passions while you were racing?
So I played a lot of. I was a good pitcher in baseball. I was a left-handed pitcher, and I think I could have went decent with that just because of the friends that I played with and what they went on to do. But I think what had happened when I quit. Yeah, I broke my elbow. I high-sided when I was 14. Broke my elbow. And it was my left elbow, and it was during pitching season. Or during baseball season, so I just stopped right then. And then that's when racing obviously was really taking off. But yeah, no, I played basketball too, but I was short, so I was always the point guard way out there. But yeah, I was good in baseball and played that, pretty much all growing up.
And what about beyond that, like, things you thought about doing during racing but you didn't have time for, like, did you always want to have a restaurant? Was that always a goal, or just like somebody came along and said, "Hey, you can"?
It was just a buddy of mine. He was like, "Hey, let's do this," and I was like, "Okay, well, I need to kind of diverse stuff." And I'd had bought land and all that kind of stuff, so just kind of messed with that. There's been a couple. I mean, I kind of wanted to have like my own pizza joint. I've talked about with my wife, when the girls get a little bit older, because she has a friend that has like one of the best Italian restaurants in Italy. Kind of talked about something like maybe having them come over and having the girls like start their own thing if that's what they want to do. But basically now I'm just kind of waiting for the girls to get older, see what they're going to be into. And then, I would like, because I selfishly want to try to keep them close to me, and they can still travel the world and do their stuff. But if there's a way to kind of get a business going that's based around my wife and kids and something they want to do, that's the next goal for me, but it's also a ways out, So now, obviously, this racing stuff coming back in where I'm able to do this has been, really fun, and that's what I want to be doing for the next few years, and then kind of, here in about 5 years we see what the next step will be.
Well, Jimmy, what do you think? You got anything else?
No, I'm ready for it. Specifically, have you listened to one of our pods yet?
Yeah.
All the way to the end?
Not all the way to the end.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I've watched a couple of them.
All
Most
right. So you don't know what's coming.
Not totally.
Okay. Dude, this is classic. Everybody says the same thing. Well, we're gonna go with it.
Yeah.
All right. So you're on death row.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So I don't know.
What'd you do?
Yeah.
This just
What
went
do you think you did? What would you do to get on death row?
death row. I mean, because you can shoot somebody and not go to death row if it's in Texas, if they're breaking into
do a
your
lot
house.
of things in Texas.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be on death row, I don't know what I would have done. I could see getting in trouble, like defending my family somehow.
I heard you do a little bit of speeding these days too.
That was not provoked by me. I was not the instigator on that one. But we did.
All right. Well, hypothetically speaking,
You're on death row for speeding. So you've got your death row meal. What's going to be your final meal? Dinner, whatever, drink,
dessert,
the whole nine. This your last meal. What
My
is
last
it?
meal
Ever?
Let me see here. No, I got this one. All right, so I'm going to go 2 rainbow rolls, no cucumber, sushi. I'm going to get some salmon and yellowtail nigiri. That's my favorite food is sushi. And then probably a white chocolate macadamia and cheesecake pie from Cheesecake Factory.
I love that. You drinking? It's death row.
Oh, if it's death row, yeah. I mean, just give me a whole bottle of whiskey then.
put a straw in it.
That's it. Yeah.
All right, nice. So you got sushi.
Jack
you got
Daniels.
Good thing you married an Italian.
I know.
Whiskey and sushi.
And then dude, I know that white chocolate macadamia nut cheesecake from Cheesecake.
Nuts are at the bottom.
And how about you put a little caramel drizzle over the top? This guy knows what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? Well, Ben, this has been unreal. Thank you so much. I'll put your poster right back up on the wall after this
So
one.
you don't hate me now.
I don't hate
It
you.
wasn't that I didn't like you. I was thinking about what I had to do.
It's so funny, man. I remember I was just like, dude,
Yeah, that dude
are you-
sucks.
what a dick. Like,
No, it's just,
That's funny.
I was in my own little world racing.
that's cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on and, really going through it with us. It's been really cool. It's awesome to see you back in the paddock. Awesome to have you helping my boy out, getting him to the front. Hopefully you guys can, as a team, get a championship this year.
Yep.
And working with Kayla as well. I think we believe in her a lot, especially from this podcast. And I know me and him personally do. And she's brought out a really cool T-shirt line and all that. So, again, man, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.